Perfect. All right, good morning. Welcome to the December 5th meeting of the Palo Alto Architectural Review Board. Can we please get a roll call to order?
Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Chen, present. Board Member Balte,
Present.
Board Member Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, we allow for a public comment. This is for the public to speak on any item that's not on the agenda. If you're here for an agendized item and you wish to speak about either the 660 University or the study session with the El Camino Real focus area, please hold your comments. You'll have time for that later. But if there's anyone who's here to speak on an item not on the agenda, please speak with Veronica, raise your hand on Zoom, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Any public comments?
I have no requests to speak.
Okay, great. We'll go to agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
No changes or deletions.
Thank you, Stephen. And then we will hand this over for city official reports.
Good morning, Stephen Schweitzer here, the ARB liaison. Let's see here. So we are in the month of December. We have 2 meetings, including this one. Since the publishing of this report, we have a tentative change for the December 19th meeting. So the 762 San Antonio was anticipated to be heard at that hearing, and that is going to be pushed into the new year. And we are going to have our first discussion for the 2025 ARB Design Awards at that upcoming meeting. That will be a study session, working through some of the items of what categories and projects that would be eligible for those design awards. Included, attachment B is the pending ARB projects, and we have had no major ARB projects submitted since the last hearing. So we're coming to a close of this year, and in the status notes section of that attachment B, there's some updates on those projects. With that, I can entertain any further questions.
Okay. Does anyone else on the board have any questions? Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. And we will move on to agenda action item number 2, public hearing quasi judicial for 660 University Avenue. 660 University Avenue, recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a planned community / planned home zoning PC / PHZ on 3 parcels, 511 Byron, 660 University and 680 University / 500 Middlefield. Deconstruction of existing medical office buildings and construction of a new 6-story mixed-use building with 66 residential rental units and approximately 9,100 square feet of office and 2-level below-grade parking garage. Recommendation from the staff is it is recommended the Architectural Review Board take the following actions, and there are 4 bullet points that I'll read out now. Consider the proposed project and provide comments. 2, consider the draft environmental impact report, attachment F, also on packet page 73 for my fellow board members. Item number 3, consider the draft findings, attachment B, on packet page 63. Item number 4, recommend continuation of the project to a date uncertain. And with that, I will hand it over to staff. Oh, excuse me. First things first. We're going to ask if, just for an affirmation, if you could kindly, we're going to go down the line and we'll just say yes if you have visited the site or no if you have not. So we'll start with board member Adcock.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I visited the site recently. Yes, yesterday.
And now I'm going to ask if the ARB members have any additional disclosures regarding the site or this project. None. Okay. Thank you very much. Now I'll hand it over to staff. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Emily Callis, and I am the project planner for this planned community rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment project located at 660 University Avenue. This project includes a comprehensive plan amendment to allow existing office to be rebuilt in the multifamily comprehensive land use designation. a planned home zoning rezoning to include a new 6-story mixed-use building with about 9,000 square feet of office and 66 residential units, 20 of which will be provided at below market rates. The project also includes 2 levels of underground parking with 78 parking stalls, which is approximately a 30% reduction from what would typically be required under the zoning code. A height exception to the 35-foot height limit for PC projects adjacent to residential uses, and reduced setbacks. The Middlefield special setback is being maintained above grade, but below grade, it's the below grade parking goes to the property line. And this project would also require the 3 existing parcels to be merged with a lot line adjustment. This project has been presented in a previous form to the ARB before. The process started with a council pre-screening in October 2021, followed by the formal application in December of that year. The ARB eventually provided a recommendation for the project in April 2024. It was to move forward to the Planning Commission in June. However, that project or that request for the hearing was canceled. The applicant made significant changes to the project that staff reviewed beginning in October. And now we are having a new architectural review board meeting to consider the revised design. The major changes from the version that was reviewed by the ARB in April includes what I mentioned earlier about the footprint being reduced to meet the 24-foot special setback along Middlefield Road. The height was increased from 4 stories to 6 stories, or from approximately 50 feet to approximately 73 feet. The number of units increased from 63 units to 66 units. The overall square footage is approximately 20,000 square feet larger. The office use was moved to the 6th floor, and the reason for this is that this property is in a flood zone, and in order to meet FEMA requirements to allow the below grade parking, at least 25% of the square footage of the building needs to be non-residential. And so in order to accomplish that, the 9,000 square feet of office plus the entire ground floor lobby and other non-residential uses comprise that 25%. As a part of that, there is no longer a roof deck for the residential use, though there is a smaller 6th floor deck for the office use. This project also has a larger daylight plane encroachment than the prior version and overall reduced usable open space for the residential units. This is the revised site plan, again showing the 24-foot setback above grade from Middlefield Road. It shows a proposed fitness center use on the ground floor, the office lobby, and the residential lobby, as well as some residential amenity spaces. The driveway is in the same location as previous with the access on Byron Street. And the setback from the preserved oak tree on the neighboring property is the same or increased where possible, but generally because of the parking ramp pretty much needing to be in the same location as previous, it's generally the same. This is a sample floor plan. This is the 3rd floor. Each floor is a little different in this building, but this generally shows the layout of the units along the central hallway, and that most, but not all of the units have balcony spaces. This shows the open office space on the 6th floor with the approximately 1,000 square foot deck area. That is pushed towards the neighbor that has the tree, which is currently a dentist office, and away from the other neighbor along this property line, which is a single family house. This shows the elevation along Byron Street compared to the prior ARB meeting for a sense of the increase in scale. The materials have remained largely the same, though the upper floor is proposed to have bird-safe glass as the sample at the dais shows. And this shows the view from Middlefield Road. Again, showing that the balconies have been stepped back from the single-family house. However, the zoning code would require the daylight plane to be applied across the entire property line for the adjacent RM20 zoning. To fit it better on the slide, I'm only showing the proposed for the University Avenue and interior property line elevations. Key considerations for the ARB to discuss include the height and daylight plane, which again exceeds the PC special requirements of Palo Alto Municipal Code, Chapter 18.38. The average open space has been reduced from approximately 230 square feet per unit to less than 100 square feet per unit, though it should be noted that 150 square feet per unit is what is typically required. And as I mentioned earlier, the applicant is requesting a 30% parking reduction, which is larger than our typical TDM plans, which accomplish a 20% parking reduction. This shows the daylight plane diagram adjacent to the single-family house. This is where the balconies are stepped back. So for the portion of the building where the balconies are not stepped back, a larger portion of the third and or the fourth and fifth floors protrude into the daylight plane. The proposed open space includes an approximately 700 square foot ground floor deck area with access from the residential lobby as common open space. Most of the units have balconies 60 square feet or larger. However, 6 of the units do not. The ARB had recommended removing some of the balconies that were within the canopy of the oak tree. However, these are not the units that do not have balconies. The units that do not have balconies are either facing University Avenue or are on the corners of the building. With regards to parking, 56 residential spaces are proposed for the 66 residential units. 21 office spaces are proposed where 37 would typically be required for a total of 77 spaces, which again is a 30% parking space reduction. As a part of the prior review, a draft environmental impact report was published and circulated. We have received comments from that draft that we are preparing responses to as a part of the final EIR, but we are also analyzing the current project to understand if there are any potentially new impacts. And the recommended motion is for the ARB to consider the project and related documents and provide comments and recommend continuation of the project to a date uncertain. This concludes my presentation. The applicants also have a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Callis. At this time, if the ARB members have a question for staff specifically on something on the presentation that we just saw, now is your chance to ask it. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, Emily. Has there been some consideration to the fact that there are so many 0-bedroom units in the figuring of the parking requirement?
Yes, the parking requirement under the zoning code or as a part of the design for this project?
Let's start with the zoning code.
Okay. I think something I forgot to mention was attachment C on packet page 28 provides the comparison to the RM20 zoning requirements as well as a comparison to the prior version of the plans. On the third page of that attachment, which is packet page 30, there is a breakdown of the required and proposed parking.
David, if you don't mind, I've got a quick question as well. Did you get your answer question?
So that's sort of the answer is that, there's been some discussion about how many parking spaces ought to be assessed to a building that has a lot of efficiency apartments. So that didn't enter into this at all, because I think there's never been a decision about that idea, but I've heard it expressed.
The applicant can speak to it farther. However, I believe that in cases where there is a parking reduction, the parking is required to be uncoupled from the units.
So there are some state laws that address that in terms of reduced parking and whether it's coupled with the units. But in this case, I think the key question about whether this is adequate parking is something that initially would be a good question for the applicant, for them to talk about how that is going to function. And then taking a look at what our standard requirements are. But in general, in the discussions that we have had on recent projects, there often is a reduction in the number of parking spaces when you have fewer bedrooms.
Right. So exactly. Another question here is sort of unmentioned is using the objective standards on this building. Do they apply as they've been approved by the city?
The objective design standards do not apply to this project, which is going through a fully discretionary design review process. However, the objective design standards may be considered when we are looking at how this project differs from what would be required for a project that is processed in a less discretionary manner.
Okay, so it's sort of optional for us to mention it or use it as a discussion point. It's up to us.
Yes.
Okay, thank you on that.
Good morning, Emily. Thanks for the nice presentation. On page 16 of the packet, you say that the applicant submitted an SB 330 pre-application for an alternative project. Do we have any description of what that alternative project would be? Point one. Point two, what would the process be if they elected to go with that sort of entitlement instead? What restrictions does the city have?
In terms of describing the project succinctly, the project is 88 units as opposed to 66. And
Sorry,
these
80, you said 88?
Yes. And these units are essentially located where the building is currently stepped back. There is a larger daylight plane protrusion as a part of that proposal.
And the height is about the same otherwise?
Yes.
And the parking is the same otherwise?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I
Sure.
believe it's similar.
But those are also things that could change if that did come forward as a formal application, as long as the size of the project in terms of floor area and number of units isn't changing by more than 20%. So it's hard to know how much different that alternative proposal would end up being if it moved forward. So
Absolutely
being
not.
aware of that and the potential of that, but then also bringing the discussion back to the project before you today.
Of course. The second point, however, is what is the entitlement process if they elect to go with that? Is that more of a guaranteed process for them?
It is a streamlined process, but there would be at least one ARB hearing.
But would they be required to do, say, a transportation demand management program for the parking? And would there be public hearings for the folks who are here to raise issues?
Yes, all of the same environmental analysis would still apply. And so the process for that would be informed by the process that the CEQA document would need to go through potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, can I ask a follow-up on that?
Can I? Oh, you want to
Sorry.
go? Let me just quickly ask, on the um, parking description, does that include or the larger amount of office space requirements as well for this building?
The proposed number of parking spaces includes some allocated for residential and some allocated for office. The reduction in parking is slightly different. I believe that there is more of a reduction. Yeah, more of a reduction is requested for the office use compared to the housing use.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is regarding, I know we're not looking at the builder's remedy project, but just to understand the zoning code requirement differences, if they pursue that, you mentioned that, daylight plane is further impacted, right, is one. Height is similar, like as far as setbacks, could, and, parking, like what are the, if you were to list out 3 to 5 things that would be, requirements would be different, not just about what the project might be different, but what the requirements would be different.
So the requirements for that would be the standard zoning requirements rather than this planned development that's proposed. So there's a difference there since this is set up to provide some customized rules for the proposed development in front of you today. However, if we are taking a look at a project that is submitted under SB 330 and is using one of the state laws that allows them to waive some of our other standards, that could include things like daylight plane, setbacks, parking, other requirements like that.
And there's no limitations to those waivers, correct? There's waivers and there's exceptions. There's 2 categories. I can't remember which one's which.
So it depends on which of the state laws they invoke, whether they are using density bonus, in which case they may, as long as they provide some justification, use unlimited numbers of waivers. The concessions, there is a specific number based on the affordability and the number of affordable units. But it does mean that through that alternative process, they very well could have larger encroachments into or exceptions to our regulations.
Would it be permissible to get a waiver for the tree protection standards of the city? Under SB 330 or something similar to that?
Yes, I would assume so. Provided that that is something that would prevent them from doing the proposed project. Generally, I guess it depends on which state law that
My
they're
understanding
using.
has always been that those environmental type issues are
So,
much more limiting, but I'd like to hear from the attorney. if you
Sure.
could.
Good morning, Kyle Ariano, Chief Assistant City Attorney. So we're sort of wading into a lot of the confusing complexities around how recent state housing laws have changed the way local agencies can review housing development projects. So all of your questions around the alternative project are good ones and valid considerations as we sort of weigh what the applicant is doing in the project before you, which is our PZ process, completely discretionary. For the builder's remedy project that the applicant has submitted, they have and builder's remedy, SB 330, those all sort of mean the same thing. I think the takeaway should be that there is a lot of uncertainty around the details in what that project would look like. They have submitted that application. As Ms. Armour noted, there's a lot of ways that application could change as long as they maintain a certain number of affordable units and a certain ratio of residential to commercial square footage. We don't expect anything significant in that sort of on those two pieces, right? They will have the required number of affordability. They will meet the ratio of residential to non-residential square footage. Different aspects of the project could change. We don't know yet. At this point, the applicant has opted to focus on the PC flavor of its project. And so that's about as far as we can take that. Now, to your specific other questions around, okay, well, let's say PC doesn't end up happening and they do pursue the builder's remedy project, what might we see? Or what might we be able to do? Again, caveat around that, we don't know. Your specific questions around the tree protection or what could be waived. I think that the best summary I can provide is very little. We cannot, or I'm sorry, there's very little discretion that we can apply to the project if they proceed under the builder's remedy route. So if we're talking about an environmental impact, it's unclear under the law whether the city could use a discretionary environmental basis to deny a project. We haven't seen any cases and we haven't seen any statutes that clarify exactly how CEQA and the builder's remedy interact. And in the time that project moves forward, state law could change. We have seen that it changes. It's been changing every single year. With respect to the other requirements, we can ask them to comply with our objective standards. However, the builder's remedy is very clear in saying that they don't need to comply with them. And our basis for denying a project would be very limited. It has to be identified, written, objective health and safety standards. And so in the absence of something like, a blatant fire code violation, we have very little discretion to deny a deviation from what our objective standards are in the context of the builder's remedy. So I've said a lot and there's a lot to think about. I think we will see this with several projects going forward, and we'll have a lot of different opportunities to evaluate how that procedure affects your job as the ARB. And so kind of put that in our, in the back of our mind, and then kind of return to the PC project before you. I think, from our standpoint, we want to acknowledge the applicant's efforts to proceed in the PC route and to engage with the city in developing a application and a project that does allow for a greater degree of discretion and feedback into their project. And so that's where we are this morning.
Thank you very much for that. Very illuminating information.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the special setback. So on packet page 22, it says this area is not identified as the planned bicycle improvements. However, is there any thoughts or any updates on whether the street itself will be widened? Either like adding a left turn lane or street parking or?
There are not any plans to. Excuse me. The reason why this conversation often comes up is because our code identifies these special setbacks as being potential future locations for either street widening or other transportation improvements. However, for Middlefield Road, there are no current plans at this time to make any types of improvements.
Okay, so in case it will be widened in the future, then for the garage, the basement garage that is go to the property line, does the city require them to do any special consideration for the structure calculations in the future? So that when the street is widened in the future, the basement still can support whatever happened above.
That is something we can look into.
Thank you.
I have one question regarding the commercial area. I know like from other projects as well, this, the square footage is the requirement for this site, right? Can you clarify like how stringent that is, if they could do without the commercial space?
So in terms of, is this specifically in terms of the comprehensive plan amendment proposal? So the current multifamily land use designation does not discuss office use, and it's been determined that a comprehensive plan amendment would be necessary to allow any type of office use in that land use designation. In this case, there is existing office both on this site and other sites with frontage on Middlefield Road that are within the multifamily land use designation. In terms of this site in particular, and likely other adjacent sites, though I haven't looked too in detail at that, this property is in the flood zone. Our objective design standards and also our subjective design standards encourage below grade parking. However, in a flood zone, in order to provide below grade parking, it needs to meet certain FEMA requirements. And so that's where there needs to be a non-residential component to this project. Does that answer the question?
But the exact square footage is not a particular requirement, or it
It
is?
does need to be at least 25% of the total building floor area, not including the parking garage.
Anywhere in the building, like on the sixth floor is okay.
It is generally able to be anywhere in the building, though any individual residential units must be above base flood elevation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can you tell us the floodplain, does that extend to Byron Street as well? And sort of, I'm talking about that. I'm mentioning it because the garage entry is on Byron, so I'm just curious as to where the floodplain angle goes to.
I have not looked at like the curvature of the flood zone, but I do know that all three existing parcels are identified in our parcel report as being in the flood zone.
In the flood zone. Okay.
Okay, I would like to, we have a lot of people who are very patiently waiting. I'd like to move us forward a little bit with this conversation. Many thanks to staff and to our city attorney for the input here. Part of the reason that we've got this SB 330 discussion, while that is not the focus of this hearing, we are aware that that is something that could be the potential outcome eventually. So that is something that we do consider and we do want to keep in mind as we move forward. However, the purpose of today's meeting is to review what's on the deck in front of us. So with that in mind, we're going to move on to the applicant's presentation and hear what they have to say about these recent changes. Thank you. And if you don't mind, please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 10 minutes.
Boyd Smith, B-O-Y-D Smith. Good morning, ARB members and staff. I'm excited to share the progress that we've made in our project at 660 University Avenue. Not to spend too much time on the history of the project, it's been talked about already. I want to focus on changes that have been made since our April 2024 ARB meeting. After a 3-2 ARB approval, we worked diligently to address the concerns raised at our last hearing and refine our design to be responsive to it and the encouragement we've received to adhere to the 24-foot setback on Middlefield Road and explore an increase in height. To make up for the lost square footage caused by adhering to this setback, the building height has been increased by 2 stories, resulting in a 6-story design. During the redesign process, we studied a 100% residential option, which we were excited about. FEMA requires that a 25% of the building must be non-residential to have below-grade parking in a flood zone. This brought us to our next design, the one before you today. To adhere to the 25% non-residential FEMA requirement while maintaining a 24-foot setback on Middlefield Road, we had to move the office to the top floor. Another result of the increased height is the addition of 3 residential units to 66 with less studios and more 1- and 2-bedroom units. This in turn has enhanced the project's affordability by increasing the number of affordable units from 13 to 14 with deeper levels of affordability. Finally, despite the changes to the building, we preserved the design commitment to protect the adjacent Coast Live oak tree, which remains an important feature of this project. Our team is proud of the progress that we've made and believes these changes reflect a thoughtful response to the feedback that we've received. We look forward to hearing your input this morning as we continue to work towards bringing this project to life. Thank you. Turn the time over to Amanda, our architect.
Kindly state and spell your name for the record. You're still on the clock.
Thank you. Amanda Borden, Borden from KSH Architects. So here on the screen, we have the overall context plan, and we have an enlarged neighborhood plan, which shows the existing 2-, 3-, and 4-story buildings in our neighborhood surrounding the site. These are photos of those existing buildings. And this is a site plan of our existing site showing the 10-foot 11 setback at Middlefield that exists today. As been mentioned, we are now proposing a 24-foot setback in compliance with the special setback requirements along Middlefield. This shows the other setbacks along that corridor, which vary. The updated renderings show the added 2 stories, including the office on the top level, which is shown to transition along Middlefield to the single-family residence. Along University, we still have the same locations for the office and residential lobby entries. We've also made some other updates per the previous ARB feedback that we received, which included extending the below grade portions of the garage within the 30-foot TPZ, which were already compliant, but we are now in excess of that requirement. We've also updated the building above grade to comply with the 30-foot setback that the ARB requested. We've adjusted the kitchen layout at the unit facing Byron that was in conflict with a window, and we've also provided a greater specification of the exterior materials. At this rendering along University, you can see the expanded public art. We're excited to be working with Catherine Wagner on this project, and we've nearly doubled the amount of public art now facing University. Here you can see the proposed office deck at the 6th floor, which is about 25% of the previous roof deck that we had on the project. This is the portion of the project that steps down more dramatically to the single-family residence on Middlefield. So here's the ground floor. You can see in purple is the proposed common area fitness at the corner. In the renderings, you would have maybe noticed that there's a lot of glass at the corner, which is intended to activate the corner and provide a gateway experience. We've also improved the residential amenity area. We now have a co-working space and a lounge with access to that rear deck. The 735 square feet is the actual paver area, but we have nearly 1,900 square feet of planted area as well as part of that portion. At these slides, you can see within the parking garage, we've shifted that foundation wall as recommended in the last hearing. The request was for 3 feet, and we've actually achieved 5 feet. On the upper levels 2 through 4, we also show in the blue line the previous wall and balcony location, which we shifted further back. All of the building walls now comply with the 30-foot setback requested, and the balconies have been pushed back further, but they're still included. This is also showing that interior unit update at Byron with the kitchen conflict of the counter and the window. This is the new 5th floor plan, which is similar to the floors below, and the new 6th floor plan for the office showing that proposed terrace, which Paul will discuss more.
These are our updated studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom unit plans. And as been mentioned, we've increased the total unit count from 63 to 66 with more 1 and 2-bedroom units overall, as well as the BMR unit count, which is 20%. And that's gone from 13 to 14 units with more 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units for BMR as well. I'll go through these elevations quickly, but they mainly just show the additional 6th floor and 5th floor. It was noted that we are providing bird-safe glass at the office level. This is the section showing the planted area within that 24-foot setback, which is intended to provide berming to support the trees. And this is the daylight plane. We've shown the oak tree beyond for reference, but you can see how the first 4 floors are still compliant with the daylight plane. And this is the section at the tree, which is showing the proposed 5 to 6 foot area that will need to be pruned in order to construct the building. We've discussed with the general contractor how we can install the balconies within that area without further pruning. They can be installed either from the inside or from the sides. So no additional scaffolding beyond what's required for the building walls will be required for the balcony installation. And one point of clarification is that the tree protection zone is actually defined as a below grade requirement. So we are still complying with the 30-foot above grade that's been requested. And lastly, we have the additional exterior materials shown here, including a photo of the simulated board form concrete. We had included a sample. We have additional samples to show the variety if you need to look at those. We have a sample of the bird safe glass. And we've also added this detail showing the mitered transition of the siding that was requested last time. And now Paul.
Thank you very much. Please state and spell your name for the record. You're still on the clock. You've got about 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yes, that should work. That's more than I usually get. Paul Lettieri with the Gazzardo Partnership, Lettierii. Yes, we'll just talk about the refinements that we've made. Small refinements along the street frontage of fine tuning some bike parking, and also a little bit more than fine tuning along the middle field frontage where by having that 24-foot setback, we now have a much wider planter, still very low at the street, and it slopes up to allow for the tree planting to happen along the edge, which I think is an improvement to the frontage. Before we had no tree planting there because we didn't have any space for it. So I think that is a good revision among others. We also refined the area where the transformers are to allow for the setbacks that are needed for access to the transformers, and the screen fencing is also still there as it was before, a slightly different location. The rear deck is similar in concept to before. We're still looking at pedestal pavers on top of the asphalt, leaving the asphalt in place to minimize any disturbance to the root systems below. The planter pots that are there would be sitting on a gravel layer, which would sit on top of the asphalt for drainage. So we would have very little disturbance, if any, in that area where the deck is, just going on top of it. And the grading allows for that to happen, as the sections will show you. The materials, we won't go through these in detail, but the bike racks and the various fencing types we have some transparent fence still out close to the edges for site visibility for cars exiting the garage, and some solid fence at the bottom of the view there, which is privacy fence, but also screening the transformers with that. It also is there's a person gate as well as access for the transformers along middle field, which would be kind of like blind. There really be exits only. And then a little picture of a deck that we've done next to an oak tree previously, a little different situation, but it's almost 10 years since it was done and it's still thriving wonderfully. Plant palette, we have 82% natives on the site. There's over 1,000 new plants going in in the proposed planting plan. The new roof deck is a much more passive roof deck. In addition to being smaller, no televisions, no barbecues. There's a planting screen all along the planned south edge of it, which planting high enough to be able to screen. Here's the section that shows that, as the red light blinks, to show the plant screening and the sight line over to the residential units to the south. And then existing photos, which you've seen, make the most important one maybe of these. The bottom left one just shows the existing retaining wall that is next to that tree, which will be left in place. Our new fencing will just go on top of that wall, replacing the chain link that's there now. And the cross section, this is the last one, cross section that shows how the pedestal paving would sit on the asphalt and the grade relationships, how the planter pots would work as well. And with that, we're available for questions.
Thanks very much. At this time, we will hold comment or questions to the applicant until after public hearing. The applicant we're going to hear through the public hearing commentary. The applicant will have a chance for a 10-minute rebuttal after that as well. But in the meantime, the ARB on our side, we're going to hold our comments. Veronica, can I get an approximate count of how many public speakers we have? I see we have a very full gallery today.
Yes, I have 4 raised hands on Zoom, 2 groups and 2 individual speakers.
Okay, perfect. On that note, we are going to limit the individual speakers to 2 minutes each, and we are going to limit the groups to 12 minutes each. So we're just going to have a slight reduction of your time. Apologies for that. We just have a lot to get through today and a lot of people here. We do want to hear your comments. We just want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak and that we're efficient with our timing today. So we will now turn the floor over to the applicants for their presentations. Excuse me, to the public. So Veronica, if you could do your first speaker card.
Okay. First, group speaker, Christopher Ream, speaking on behalf of Dennis, Kay, Sophie, and Joanne.
Perfect. Thank you. And sir, you'll have 12 minutes to speak. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Christopher Ream, R-E-A-M.
Thank you.
I'm here on behalf of all these people who live at the Hamilton. We're in the same block. We've got a lot of concerns about this project. My wife Ann and I have been residents in Palo Alto for the past 53 years. And we've been at the Hamilton for 6 years. The Hamilton's a senior condo development. I think probably all of you are aware of that. I submitted 2 comment letters, which unfortunately were a little bit late, so they didn't get in the packet, but I hope you got them. Good. Okay, I want to talk about that Coast Live Oak to start with. It's 50-inch diameter trunk, 90 diameter canopy, and it's a protected tree under the City of Palo Alto rules. Tree is next door to the property, on the property line, so the canopy stretches 45 feet over where applicant wants to build. Go to my first slide, please. It's on? I can't see. Okay. I'll have to have my copy. Speak up? Okay. How's that? That's a lot better. Okay. Okay, so right now the canopy is sticking out 45 feet. The tree protection zone calculations say they should be 41-foot radius. So that cuts it back a little bit. Then the applicant has just proposed, instead of 41 feet, why don't we just say 30 feet? But what the applicant goes on to suggest is that they're going to actually do 24 feet. But in reality, by the time they finish, it's going to be 19 feet only. It's going to just keep getting cut down. Okay, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, this is a letter dated May 28th, 2024 from the applicant's arborist to the applicant. And what I really want to focus on, next slide, please, is the beginning of this paragraph number 2. Next slide, please. Okay, there you can see it a bit larger. And what he's basically saying, even though we said a 30-foot protection zone, we're going to have to cut that back 5 or 6 feet in order to get the balconies in there. And maybe somebody has this idea that you just have the little cut around that balcony, but you've seen the plans. There are balconies all along that wall, they're going to have to just cut it off straight. So that brings them down to 24 feet. And then the reality is once you get some people in there, they're going to not want to have the tree up within 1 inch of their balcony. They're going to want to have at least 5, maybe 6 feet back to get a little room on their balconies, which they intend to use. At least I assume the applicant thinks they'll be using them. So that brings us down to about 19 feet. That's a big cut back from what should have been 41 feet all the way down to 19 feet. Okay. We also have a report from the arborist, applicant's arborist, that the tree, once it's cut, the canopy is going to be imbalanced because for some reason, over years of pruning, it's gotten to where most of the weight of the canopy is out on the edge, but that's the edge that's going to be cut off. So a disproportionate amount of the weight of the canopy will be removed. And this will be like a seesaw on the playground, if you've ever been on a seesaw. When you get somebody who's a little bit lighter, they actually have to be further out on the seesaw to balance it. We have the opposite here. We've got the light side that's coming in with very short distance. The leverage is almost nothing. So the canopy is really going to want to push that tree over. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's go underground. If you've seen the LiDAR report, it shows they only went out to 51 feet, but the LiDAR report shows very healthy plant structure going out at that 51 feet. And as I understand from other discussions, that roots will frequently be 2 to 3 times the canopy. So probably the roots go out about 100 feet, maybe more, but they're going to be cut off. Once again, we start with the tree protection zone at 41 feet. That's the City of Palo Alto standard. And the applicant once again has said, well, let's just make it 30 feet. But then we have let's see. Next slide, please. In the applicant's tree protection report, which by the way, I mentioned in my letter, that they now are filing a report from, I think it's, I can't remember whether it's December or January, but it's 2021. Instead of the more recent report, they have one in February of 2024, which they had filed before, but now they've superseded it with an earlier report. And perhaps one of the reasons is that there's a lot of discussion in the February 2024 report of this tree's canopy and this tree's roots, which isn't in the earlier report that they now have filed. And here's something that says, as you can see, a 20-foot setback for the root protection. So we just went from 45 or 51, maybe 100 feet down to 41, down to 30, and now down to 20. And when they say they're going to do anything they want up to that 20 feet, they're going to kill every single root out there that's more than 20 feet away, because they're going to want to work in that area to build the garage. So we've got this canopy that's imbalanced, trying to tip the tree over. The only thing that's protecting it is the roots are holding it. Suddenly the roots are cut off. I just don't think that tree is going to survive very long. Okay, I'd like to move on to the building itself now. I mean, I'd love to talk about the tree for a long time, but I can't. I can see I'm starting to run out of time, so I won't. Moving on to the building itself, parking, major problem. If I think all of you said that you'd been down to the site not too long ago, you get on Byron Street during the daytime, it's a tough drive there. Every single parking spot is taken on both sides. If I'm driving in there and another car is coming, I have to find some place to pull out a little bit so we can pass. It's basically, it's quote, a two-way road, but in reality, it's one at a time, two ways. Big problem for us is that there's no short-term parking for this project. With that number of units there, there's going to be a lot of deliveries. Where's that truck going to be that delivers that stuff? He's going to stop right in the middle of Byron because he can't stop on University, he can't stop on Middlefield. So he's going to stop on Byron. Byron is going to be clogged. It's going to be clogged every day. I tried to understand what applicant was calculating when they went through the calculation of number of parking spots. And please take a look at my letter. It goes on for a full page of why in the world did they say this and why did they say that? It seemed to me that they were suddenly losing, I think it was 59 parking spots. And they may have found some legal reason to do it, but the reality is if there might be a legal reason not to have a parking spot, but the reality is people who live in that building are going to have cars and they're going to park someplace. So there's a fight between technical compliance and reality. Okay, they also have a stacking system they're using, made by a German company. And you can see by the dimensions of the stacking system, you understand that cars in the European Union tend to be smaller than cars here. And those stacking system parking spots are just not big enough for the cars that we have here. As Ana Lopez said in her comments to this, that there should be a certain size, well, they're not meeting that size. Then they have something called the independent puzzles. There's nothing I saw in their last filing of what an independent puzzle is, what its size is or anything else. And they're going to put that on the first floor of the parking, which I think is for the clients of the office space. And that could be very dangerous. Next slide, please. Okay, we've got the setback, the daylight plane, I mean. As you can see very clearly, it slashes right through the 5th floor and the 6th floor. I don't know what the intention is there. I don't know whether they have some sort of a legal excuse for doing that, but I hope you take a look at that. Next slide, please. And here you've discussed this before. That's the Middlefield setback, and I was concerned about the fact that the garage goes right out to the property line, but you guys already picked up on that. Then I want to mention the 24 balconies hanging over University Avenue. I've always been scared of that they're going to drop a beer bottle and it's going to hit the sidewalk because there's a 1 foot setback, beer bottles will go out. So with that, thank you very much for the time. I see a red light blinking, so I better stop.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next public speaker.
Next is Carol Gilbert, speaking on behalf of Rose and Franco.
Good morning, board. I'm inviting you to the TDM Dream. Slide 1, please.
If you could kindly state and spell your name for the record, and you'll be speaking on behalf of a group. Ma'am? Ma'am?
I'm sorry. what do
Yes,
you-
will you be speaking on behalf of a group?
I'm speaking on behalf of two other residents.
Two other residents, perfect, okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Okay. Smith Construction hired a private transportation demand management company, a TDM. And their task is to make us all drink the Kool-Aid, to believe that this building will convert its residents from drivers into bike riders, walkers, and onto public transportation. TDM says that their strategies will reduce parking demand and encourage alternative transportation options and eliminate potential spillover parking in the neighborhood. There can be no guarantee that traffic reduction in the neighborhood will ever happen. Good positive changes in habits will be encouraged, but there is no way to enforce them. Residents will be asked to reduce single vehicle occupant commuter trips by 45%. Transportation timetables will be made available, presentations on transportation, encouragement for better habits, flyers, bike support, and carpool promotion. They're all parts of the plan, and they are noble goals, but unenforceable standards. And you are probably aware that we do have a TMA, or Palo Alto Transportation Management Association, and it's not a city agency. It's a nonprofit, much like local businesses, and they provide funding for management of transportation programs. They will not set city policies or make decisions that are responsibility of the city. There will be limited parking spaces in the building. I think we are all very clear on that. And there is no parking or 2-hour parking on any street surrounding that building except Byron. Could I have slide 2, please? In the middle of that slide is where the proposed building would be. Everything on the streets around it are either red or green. If it's red, there's no parking. If it's green, there's 2-hour parking. So any overflow from that building is really going to be on the hunt for parking. The only visible place for auto ingress egress has ended up on Byron Street, and that will increase our traffic there considerably. The city, i.e. you, are charged with keeping our streets usable and our residents safe. The next slide shows Byron Street, slide 3, on one of its absolutely impossible days.
If we may have the next slide.
I did not ask these trucks to be there. I did not phony this picture. I went out there one day and this was how bad it was. Next slide, please. This is the width of Byron Street. It is 29 feet wide. The average car is 7.3 inches to 8 feet wide. The average delivery truck is 8 to 9 feet wide. Just 4 cars across the width is 29.2 inches with no space between them. Additional units will only add FedEx, Amazon, postal delivery trucks, plus garbage trucks and vehicles. You can see load vehicles in the next architectural plan. Let's see the next slide, please. This is from their architectural plans. And you will see in that plan where there is kind of a regular flatbed truck and even worse, the garbage truck, which is on an angle and is essentially blocking the whole street. There's a lot going on a very little street. All of our city boards must consider keeping all of our residents and vehicles safe in the vicinity of 660 University. There are therapy offices, dental offices, a preschool, 36 residents plus staff at the Hamilton, people on walkers, people with canes, people in wheelchairs. Given the 29 feet width of Byron Street, you need to consider reconfiguring this building and Byron Street to handle the reduced parking attendant to it. First, I ask you to decline this TDM dream set of plans. And if I could have my dream, it would be the board and the developer would return to the plan that your board, although it was some of you were different, we were all so close to approving. And they seem to have thrown to the side. Replace 2 years. Also, if you're going to go with a TDM plan, you really must ask that company for at least 2 years of data from someplace where they've implemented it, because I don't think they've got the data to support their very, very large dream of how everyone is going to get out of their cars or drop their cars and get off on their bikes or on a bus. I don't think it's feasible. I'd also like to say we could have parking on one side of the street to let it remain a two-way street so that vehicles can ingress and egress from both University and Hamilton. And I think that that would consider emergency vehicles, which are important. At least they come to the Hamilton. I don't know about other places. Or retain parking on both sides of the street and make it a one-way street, but consider emergency vehicles under that circumstance. And I don't think it's terribly good. And according to Smith plans, these trucks and all seem to be able to only come through from Hamilton and exit on University. It's a traffic nightmare in the making. I think you have the duty to consider all of us with the development that goes on at 660 University. And I appreciate your time and attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker. You could kindly hold your applause. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we do need to maintain decorum in the room here.
Next is Stephen Levy.
Thank you. Mr. Levy, please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Sorry, seems unfair that a resident talking for 2 other residents gets 12 and I get 2.
I apologize for the mix-up. The previous applicant should have, or the previous public speaker should have had 6 minutes, and I apologize for the mistake. If you could kindly keep your comments to 2 minutes, we will listen as attentively as possible.
My request is for you, as always, to make your professional comments, but to disregard the staff's recommendation for a continuance and move this project forward. Both the applicant, I, the 100 people in support who wrote letters, and all of the people in the audience with concerns deserve a decision. There is no benefit, in my opinion, from rehashing here concerns about the tree and parking. They will ultimately be decided by the council, where those with concerns, those in support, and the applicant can make their case. I respect the last two meetings where you have combined your comments with the realization that projects must be financially viable and move them forward. I think you should do the same here. You've had discussions, and I'm interested in what the applicant considers of getting a larger project under builder's remedy. And as the chair said last time, the alternative to turning down a project is no project. We are discussing a project like the two at 3265 and 3150 in high priority areas for continuing housing. I don't see how it is helpful to continue now. This would be the fourth year for the applicant for this project. Please make your comments, move it forward so the applicant and all of us can get a decision. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker.
Next is Amy Ashton.
Good morning. If you could please state, spell your name for the record, you'll have 2 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Amy Ashton, and I'm Executive Director of Palo Alto Forward. We submitted a letter as well as an attachment with over 100 pages of letters from residents supporting this little project. I'm often before you to advocate for housing policies and projects in the city, but this project is 2 blocks from my house, and I'm excited to be here to say yes in my own backyard. I live almost entirely car-free, and that is the benefit this location provides. And with regard to parking, I'd just like to note if this project was 1 block closer to Caltrain, it would be covered by AB 2097 and wouldn't be subject to parking mandates at all. The increased height, which doesn't seem to be an issue for anyone, results in more units, more affordability, more landscaping, which looks gorgeous at that corner, and I fully support it. Repeating Mr. Levy's comments, this project's been through 3+, almost 4 years of delay and review. It won't solve these concerns that we hear over and over. I've been to 3 hearings and it's the same concerns. Instead, I urge you to provide a recommendation to Planning Commission and City Council, move this project forward. I look forward to seeing this built in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker.
Yes, next on Zoom. So first is Corey Smith.
Good morning, Corey Smith on behalf of the Housing Action Coalition. We are a member-supported nonprofit that advocates for creating more housing for residents of all income levels around the state of California. And our endorsement committee got the opportunity to review this proposal, and we are proud to be here in support. You should have also received an additional 30 letters or so from us through neighbors. They love to be here to speak in support, but unfortunately, it is almost 10 a.m. on a Thursday, and people do need to work. The proposal will bring much needed homes to Palo Alto. We were impressed by the project's dedication to affordable housing, which includes 20% of the units to the lower tier levels, which is especially important considering these current economic conditions. And prioritizing affordable housing and urban development can create a more sustainable and inclusive community for everybody. We also appreciate the reduction in parking in order to accommodate the setback requirements that this body has asked for. In terms of land use, the project cites central location to downtown amenities, Caltrain, and the inclusion of ample bike parking facilitates and underscores a commitment to promoting environmental sustainability and reducing the reliance on automobiles. In terms of the overall design, We commend the project and the steps they've taken to preserve the oak tree. It's critical to support this project, and we do these all over the place. I assure you, one more meeting is not going to solve this problem. Please move it forward today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker.
Next is Armando Murillo.
Kindly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes.
Good morning, members of the Architectural Review Board. Armando Murillo, Murillo, and I'm here representing Local 405 of the Northern California Carpenters Union. As you can hear, I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but wild horses could drag me away from wanting to address the proposed project at 660 University Avenue. While this project has the potential to bring significant benefits to our community, I must express my concern that the developer has not chosen a responsible contractor, one that pays area standard wages and provides critical benefits to its workers. This decision is a missed opportunity to invest in hardworking men and women who build our community. Responsible contracting ensures that workers are paid fairly and receive the benefits they need to support their families and live in this area. Without these standards, the project undermines the well-being of local workers and sets a troubling precedent for future development standards. As members of this board, you have an important role to play in holding developers accountable, not just for the aesthetics or the functionality of their projects, but for the impact on the broader community. I urge you to advocate for responsible practices that prioritize fair wages, good benefits, and the economic stability of our workforce. So let's work together to ensure that 660 University Avenue is not just another development, but a project that truly serves the interests of everyone in our community. Again, thank you for your time and consideration in this matter, and happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker.
Next is Noah Schneider.
Kindly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, Noah Schneider, Noah, Schneider. Okay, I am a college student at USC studying urban planning. I was born and raised in the South Bay. I would like to support new housing being built at 660 University. California and the Bay Area has a crisis with homelessness and rising rents. I don't think anyone here would dispute that. In my opinion, and the opinion of the majority of Americans across all demographics, as well as the UCLA Lewis Center and UC Berkeley Turner Center, we need more housing units to combat both of these issues. Research shows that without a doubt, building more housing reduces rents and decreases homelessness. California builds less housing than other states, and this is why housing prices are so high and people are leaving towards inland areas and out of the state completely. Not to mention, building more housing increases property and sales tax revenue. This project in particular is also near public transportation. We need to stop treating density like an impact and start realizing that it is a benefit. Are we really going to stop housing units from being built, thus increasing housing costs and homelessness because of a single protected tree and subjective setback and parking requirements? Are we going to choose parking over people? We need to build enough housing to keep rental increases in control, or else my generation and friends will be forced to leave California, like the generation above me did, as seen by the raw number of Californians under 50 decreasing over the last 15 years, while it has increased massively across the nation. I suppose this fact does not matter to the average age of people who are free to speak on a Thursday at 10 a.m. against new housing. It's funny to pretend the average person opposed in this meeting is representative of the community and defer to it, as opposed to the California voters who vote for representatives who pass bills to make it easier to build new housing. Thank you, and I hope the board gets out of the way and lets apartments be built in one of the wealthiest zip codes in the history of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker.
Next is Robert.
Please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes.
All right, my name is Robert Aguirre, Aguirre, and I represent unhoused people throughout the entire county of Santa Clara. I'd like to state that in Palo Alto, according to their housing element, 17% of the population is spending between 30 and 50% of their income for rent, and another 14% are heavily burdened, spending more than 50% of their income. That's 31% that are spending more than 30% of their income. Palo Alto is made up primarily of professionals that are high earners, and that skews the average income by large margins. And so many of the people that need to have housing are unable to attain it, or are spending way too much money of their income for that same housing. And we've got problems with people that are living in the streets, living in places that they shouldn't be living, or in crowded situations. And this is an opportunity to be able to build housing. And even though 20% is what's being designated for affordability, and that's different types of affordability, it doesn't address the 31% that we're talking about earlier of people that are burdened. As far as the tree goes, I think the tree is important to keep. I've driven through many of the streets of Palo Alto, and they're all tree lined and they're all beautiful. And there's no reason why the residents of this property shouldn't be able to enjoy some of that same tree shade and coverage, which is very good for their health. So I'm very much in favor of this project, and I would hope that Palo Alto would embrace this and build many, many more of these types of units, and provide more housing for more people, so we have fewer people living in the streets. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker.
That's all our speakers.
Great, thank you very much. At this time, we are closing the public hearing for public comment. To the board, if you guys have any questions to specific public speakers, now would be the time to ask them. I see none.
Yeah, no.
Oh, you have one for a specific public speaker.
Yes, the architect.
That will be for the applicant. Well, the architect's going to have a minute to rebut, and then we'll ask the applicant
Okay.
afterwards.
You wanna
This
do
would be
that? Yep.
specifically for public speakers.
Sure, fine.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, we go on to the applicant rebuttal. You will have 10 minutes to speak. I would kindly request that efficiency is appreciated here.
Thank you. I don't think we'll need the 10 minutes. Thank you for the thoughtful conversations. Regarding the tree, we can go round and round on this tree as non-tree experts, as we have been, and debate what is being done. But the reality is we are doing exactly what the city arborist has agreed we can do. We should trust the tree experts and let this process move ahead with the city's guidelines on how we handle the tree. The tree is very important to us. We're putting up a bond of 200% of the value of the tree, which I've never heard of before, but we are happy to do it. Regarding the parking, this is an extremely walkable site. If we were a block closer to Caltrain, we would not have to park this project at all. It is a pleasant walk to walk from this project to the Caltrain station. The Caltrain is a game changer in this location. We also have 78 stalls, 26 for office, that can be used by the residents during the evening hours. We also, I think it's worth noting, we lost parking when the residents of the Hamilton insisted that we move the drive ramp from Middlefield to Byron. Even when the traffic experts within the city hired said there was no difference in the traffic impact between a Middlefield or Byron ramp. I just think it's important to recall that history. We're also losing parking by maneuvering our ramp to preserve this oak tree. So we are trying to be responsive to the many points of feedback we have received and reach kind of a common ground. Our TDM plan is solid, and the proximity to Caltrain, as I noticed, is a game changer. Also want to mention that we have our TDM expert and our arborist here and able to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your comments and your efficiency. At this time, we will turn the questions over to the ARB. Any questions or and this is, we are going to do questions, not comments, for staff or the applicant. And to the applicant, you may want to reside in that front row, as you might be jumping up and down a little bit here. So who would like to start us off?
Well,
I have
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, David.
Could I ask what the slope of the parking ramp is?
The slope is proposed as a speed ramp, 22% with 11% blends.
And what does it mean? 11% is at the bottom and at the top?
Yeah,
something?
there's a 10-foot blend at the top and the bottom. There's also a 5-foot slope up before we start sloping down. That's part of the flood protection requirements.
Oh, good. That was
Yeah.
the second question I had.
And we have a flood gate at the top.
Okay, that's the third question.
There you
Okay,
go.
that's very good for that. Thank you. In terms of deliveries, have you conceived of how that'll be handled? I understand you have the TDM, but where in fact, because we're certainly going to have a lot more deliveries as we have a dense building like this.
Yeah, so there's actually two opportunities for that. We are removing a street stall to provide a loading stall for both the trash pickup as well as other incidental loading. And then we also have a trash room on site, which can accommodate loading for our project.
Yes, the trash room. I mean, I saw that as an opportunity. Can cars, delivery vehicles pull up to that area during the day without getting tickets? How does that work?
We have a roll-up door, so coordination would be required with the leasing office on the ground floor, but if needed, the loading for our site for delivery vehicles could be accommodated by that trash room on site.
And in the street, the vehicle, where does the vehicle go?
In the street, there is a loading stall that is parallel to the curb within the street parking zone.
Okay, and is it a reserved area or how's that?
It's
work?
reserved as a loading zone.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, does the Hamilton have its entry on Byron as well? Do you know?
I'm hearing yes.
I should say.
Thank you. I'm hearing from our experts out here, yes.
Okay, just wanted clarification on that aspect of it. So that would be move-in as well?
Correct.
Okay, because there seemed to me to be space within the, even with maybe shifting your machines in the compactor machines in some way to provide for staging of.
Yes.
In terms of a management, I don't know if you've gone that far, but can you schedule your move in, move out sort of situation so that it would be satisfied by that facility area?
Yes, we actually have a residential management company that we've been talking to throughout this process to help make sure that we accommodate all the amenities. And they have described to us a very thorough move-in process in which they schedule things. They also help with deliveries. And so we have a mail room that's large enough. And then they also have a concierge service that can accommodate larger deliveries up directly to the units.
So for food deliveries, for, meal deliveries that happen in buildings like this quite often, how can you describe, has anybody been discussing that with you?
We have discussed two different approaches. One would be that those are delivered to the ground floor and accommodated by the leasing office. I think that would primarily be during the day. I think in the evening hours when the leasing office isn't occupied, then the tenants would either need to come down to the ground floor, or they would need to provide more information so that the deliverer can get up to the upper floors.
So that's worked through telephone connections.
Yeah.
Prior to delivery. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might have more, but that's.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few questions for the regarding the office trash. So what's the circulation for the office trash? How do people get from the 6th floor down to the trash room on the ground floor, and how the trash collection will be happen on the road?
Yeah, thank you. So the office trash is one of the elements that was revised in this new proposal. And the 6th floor office trash will be handled by a janitorial staff. It'll come down through the elevator into the trash room that's between the fitness area and the residential amenity area. And all of the office trash will be taken care of with the smaller rolling bins, the 64 and 96 gallon carts. And that'll be staged on Middlefield, similar to the adjacent single-family residence and all the other residents on that street.
Okay. Since the office space is about the similar size as the existing, do you know how often it will happen for the office trash? And for the existing condition, where does the trash truck stop and pick up the.
I don't know where the current trash service is. We could certainly look into that. I don't remember off the top of my head the proposed trash service schedule, but we do have it in the drawings and I can look it up and then come back to answer that question.
Okay. And another question is on the ground floor. So on the residential side, is it the areas for the tenants only, or it, for example, the co-working space, it will also be accessed for the public?
The intent currently is for the residential amenity to be for the residents only.
Okay. How about the fitness center?
The fitness center is proposed to be used by the office and the residential tenant. That's certainly something that could be discussed, and the client could answer that better probably.
Okay. So is there like a plan to open the fitness center to the public?
We had considered that. The parking becomes the challenge, and the concern for us is it puts more strain on the parking demand. So I thought it's a cleaner, easier land use to have it just available to the office and residential.
I see, thank you. So if it is for the residential, then how will the tenants come to the fitness center? Maybe that's a question to the
Yeah, I think that's
architect.
a fair one.
Is it through the door between the office lobby and trash room?
Yeah, I was just referring back to the plan to make sure I was remembering correctly. But you can see on that ground floor plan, there is a door from the amenity space that goes through the office lobby. And that's the interior connection. And then from the exterior, they could also go out through the front door and then down and up the ramps to get there.
Is there any way we could pull up sheet A 2.1 so that everyone can see what we're discussing?
Bear with us while we pull that up.
Not a problem. But to just follow up with that question, it looks like there is an exterior route. They could take the elevators down, walk out the front doors, down the sidewalk and into the fitness center, or they could walk down the hallway inside through the office lobby and then into the fitness center, all internally as well.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And for the level 1 parking, so could you please explain all those parkings, are those for the doctors, professionals there, or it could be also for the patients?
Yeah, so the way that the parking works is on the lowest level, the P2 is where the independent, excuse me, the independent stackers are. And those allow any of the residents to use the stackers without having to move anybody else's car. Those are residential only. There's 100% EV. And then on the P1 level is the office parking. And that's available to the residents on nights and weekends when the office is not in use. And that's also where all of the accessible parking is.
So is there like designated area for who work there versus who, like the patients, since it's a medical offices?
It's not proposed as a medical office. That certainly could be the tenant for the office, but it's in any type of office use. And the office parking is only on the P1 level. And then that is shared with the residential nights and weekends, but the residential is, well, the office is not parking on the lowest level. That is residents only.
I see. And on P1 level, it seems like there is some elevation change at the, say, bike parking or elevations, and there are some ramps showing on the floor plan. Is it correct?
Yeah, there's a building code requirement that began in 2016, I believe, to have raised pedestrian pathways. So we have incorporated 4-inch curb ramps. And I think it's intended mostly for visually impaired, so that as you're walking down the curb ramp, you have a signal that you're entering a vehicle area. So it's for pedestrian safety.
Okay. And for the elevation, so since the office is on the very top, is it still very conceptual design to have all the glazings all around, or say if it is still the medical office, then there could be cabinets all around, so which means it's hard to do the full height glazing there.
We've incorporated a shadow box at the top as well. The intent is to provide the future tenant with the most light and views possible. We would certainly work with the tenant to provide an interior build out that is amenable to the exterior building design. We would encourage them to place solid elements further interior to the floor plan.
As far as the materials, so I see you have the concrete panels showing there. So have you ever considered to use the real concrete, like to do it on site?
Yeah, that's what we started with, and I think that's what we may have presented in our last hearing in April with you guys. We talked about it with the contractor, and what we wanted to propose was a lighter weight material that would be better for constructability. And so this material that we found is actually really interesting because it's a simulated concrete panel, but once they install it, it's a direct adhered product. They actually install the grout kind of projection between the panels. And so it ends up looking like a real board form concrete panel with that installation, which is really nice.
And staff, could you please pull up sheet A 3.3B? That is the building section.
I realize the version I have pulled up doesn't show the shadow boxes that were being described, so I'm going to get the other plan set up, but it's going to take a second.
Sure. I think I also have it available if you want me to share my screen again, if that would help.
That might be a little faster. Thank you.
Board Member Chen, could I chime in on the board form concrete question to the architect? This sample I have in front of me is the simulated board form concrete?
Yes, you might be looking at I think it's the opposite side than what you're showing out. That's,
It's the side with the label on it.
I believe the side with the label is the finished product, and we have some other samples up here that show the
So
variation.
this is intended, and the photograph that was submitted, is this a photo of the simulated product? Or is this a
Correct.
photo-
That's a photo of the installation with the grout installed.
So it looks like this. This is a very realistic looking simulation.
Well, I believe that's a constructed photo, a mock-up.
Great, thank you for showing.
Yeah.
Can I just interject here for a moment? The ground concrete ramps, are you saying that all of the base of the building it will be that concrete, including those ramps and the normally poured walls of the ramps to the entry doors?
I'm not sure that I understand your question. Could you say it again?
Concrete ramps have, beside the ramp itself, is there a side rail that is made out of concrete, or is it up to the point of railing height? Is it, what is it?
The vehicle ramps don't have railing. They're just for the cars. Those are the one connecting between the two parking levels and from grade down. And then the 4-inch raised pathways are accommodated by curb ramps, similar to what you see like from the sidewalk to enter a crosswalk. And those don't have railings. They're just about 4 feet long and they just travel 4 inches in height, and there's no railings.
The ramps to the doors you're talking about now.
Ramps from landings at pedestrian occupied areas like the bike room or access to the elevators or stairs down to the vehicle driveway area is where those curb ramps are. I could show them on plan if that would be helpful.
Yeah, to
Please
help
do.
clarify, if you could see, if I'm understanding David's question, could you go up one level from there?
Yeah, so the P2 level, this is the residential parking level. So we have a curb ramp here. You would enter, this is flush with the drive aisle, and you either go right to the stair or left to the bike room. And so these are just 4-foot sections that are traveling up 4 inches. And that's just a building code requirement.
David, are you asking about the railings on the exterior? So if you could go to the
Yes.
ground level?
Oh, I
It's
apologize. Yeah.
where
Front
the,
elevation.
right,
There
so
are small
there you
ramps.
go, right there.
These ramps, yes, these ramps will have railings. There's a low concrete base wall with a railing above, so it's kind of a half-half.
Okay, so they're not poured concrete other than the ramp itself.
That's correct. It'll have a port in place, a wall between the ramp and the sidewalk that's low, not full railing height. I can go back to the elevation too to show that.
Through the chair.
So you can see here, we have the concrete base is to, that meets the base flood elevation, and then above the base flood elevation is the railing.
If I may, through the chair. So just a time check-in, it is 10:12. We do have a study session. We still are on questions for this item. Potentially moving into comments would be recommended.
Okay, we'll try and keep our questions efficient. We'll get those through, but we would like to make sure that everybody does get a chance to speak. But thank you for the time check.
Can I go to my questions?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of questions for the applicant. One is, not finding it right now, but when I read the report, there was a kind of construction timeline noted, which was about 11 months, which seems quite fast for construction of this size. So I was just wondering if there's, any fast tracking plans that might be of impact to streets and neighbors.
I would have to double check, but I believe it's longer than that. I think it's more of like a 15 to 18 month construction process. I think certainly the contractor and the developer will do whatever we can to fast track the project. But I believe it is longer than 11 months. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And kind of related to kind of construction as well, you have 2 levels of basement with walls right up to the property line. Is that, I can't tell from the thickness, but I assume like in the order of 18 inches, 2 feet thick exterior walls. Is that shoring with, piles and lagging up to the edges? Like, is the edge of the building, I guess the question is the edge of the building at property line, or is the edge of shoring at property line?
On the 3 street frontages, the face of the exterior wall is at the property line. And so shoring would need to encroach within the frontage underneath the sidewalk. At the interior lot line, we've shifted the parking, the ramp wall away from the interior lot line so that all shoring is of course on our private property. I believe that addresses all the conditions.
Okay, so like around the tree, for instance, where you've got the protection zone and the wall, particularly the ramp that's towards Middlefield, comes right up to the 30 feet line. So the shoring would be into the 30 feet line.
This section actually shows that 30 foot. And it's in red here. I'm zooming in. And so this is where we actually moved the foundation wall an additional 5 feet away from where it was previously. And the shoring is shown in this hatched area. It's 26 inches wide. And so all of that is outbound of the 30 foot for the main portion of the parking. The ramp walls on either side at the P1 level will have shoring within the 30 foot protection zone. And that's accommodated by the arborist report. It'll be done under the supervision of the arborist, the excavation and shoring install.
Okay, yeah, like on A2.P1, right? It shows the 30-foot dotted line right up to the edge of the wall, which is not that section, but close to it. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, this is one of the sections here. This is the lower level, and then this is the upper level. So at these 2 conditions, the permanent walls, exactly, the permanent walls are outside of that 30-foot zone. On the left, the initial ramp from grade down is an additional foot away from that. So the shoring will be kind of half within and half out. And then the ramp between the 2 levels is as tight as we could possibly make it. And that is permanently out, but the shoring is within that zone.
And it's left behind kind of shoring or not?
That is kind of a means and methods that I would have to rely on the future general contractor and the arborist to work out. That's a level of detail that I don't believe has resolved whether or not the shoring will be removed or not. I think it would be whatever's in the best interest of the health of the tree. Okay. In terms of disturbance.
All right, something to note, because if it's like piles and lagging, it gets left behind. So it's kind of it's within your 30 feet. for the foreseeable future. Okay, and I'm going to pivot to a different question, which is regarding on both the north Middlefield and Byron side, you have that stair to the garage, and we had discussed this last time when you presented as well back in April. I'm still unclear on what the fence is around those stairs.
That is a metal railing, so it'll be similar to that elevation I just showed of the ramps to the main lobbies. There'll be a concrete wall from grade up to the base flood elevation, which is required for our FEMA requirements, and then above that'll be an open railing for sightline. So you can see through the railing, but it provides the fall protection required.
And what's the height on that?
The height of the railing is 3'6". The height of the base flood, I believe, is 1'10" above grade.
So if you zoom in right there on the left stair, so that door into the stair is actually a short gate. Like
Correct. Yes, a 3'6" tall gate.
42-inch.
Yes.
And then that's open air all the way to P2 level.
Correct.
Okay, and then the related to that, the little strip of planting that's outside of the lounge and the coffee bar, is that planted, and how is that maintained between the railing and the window?
That is planted, and perhaps Paul could describe how it's maintained or what exactly the planting is, but it would be, maintained from either side or from the stair itself.
Okay. And a separate question, if you slide over to the leasing office and the Amazon mailboxes, is that just for residents or is that a community benefit?
The intent is that all of this is private for the residential use.
Okay. And then my fourth item question is about the daylight plane, which if you could go to section 3 on, I don't remember what section, what sheet your section is on. I'm sorry?
3.3B.
3.3, thank you, David. So this kind of is following my question earlier about the square footage of office required, because that the office level on the 6th floor is heavily encroaching into the daylight plane of the next door neighbor, single family home. I assume you already looked into any ways that you could make that any skinnier to minimize daylight plane impact into. Can you elaborate on?
We could physically make it skinnier. We would not comply with the 25% minimum non-residential area that's required for this project to have below grade parking.
So it's a kind of a ripple effect problem.
Yeah, unfortunately, the project cannot move forward if it doesn't meet FEMA.
Okay, thank you.
Since we are on this sheet, can I ask a quick question? Could you please clarify the floor to ceiling height? Because there is a dimension showing 7'9" as a.
Yes.
Yeah, so 7'9" is the bottom of soffit. So that would be the head height of the doors at the primary, residential levels. The final ceiling height has not been necessarily shown here. That's going to require, coordination with MEP. We would certainly aim to have an 8-foot ceiling if possible. Yeah.
I'm going to ask sort of a big question, is that we reviewed this project previously as a 4-story. What was the precipice for changing this so dramatically?
I think the primary thing we're pointing to is that after the ARB hearing, we heard very strongly from other members of boards, of staff, that the 24-foot setback was really important. And the only way that we could incorporate the 24-foot setback and meet all the other requirements of the project was to add 2 floors to the building. So that's the primary change here and the reason for it.
If the project had not pushed back that 24 setback, right? And you had continued with the other one. Would this FEMA regulation of 25% office space require on that project as well? Is that something that was just sort
Yes.
of not understood properly in the previous version?
The previous project complied with that as
Complied with that
well.
Okay,
Yep,
perfect.
that requirement's the same.
Okay. Okay, that's my only question.
But you increased 3 units, right?
We
from the
increased by
previous
3
one.
units from previous.
So
But
it-
they did do a lot going from studios to 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. I was confused about that as well. I'm like, how do we go 2 stories up and only get 3 units? But it really is a
Yes,
pretty dramatic move.
it's the quantity of units that we're losing within that setback.
Right.
Plus the increase from the quantity of studios to have more 1 and 2 bedrooms.
If I could ask, I believe we established an ad hoc committee to review this project. Did that committee actually do so? And if so, could we get a report from them what changes they approved?
There's been no ad hoc meeting?
I saw some note on the timeline about an ad hoc committee.
No.
What I'm really driving to understand is which materials and finishes on the exterior were previously approved by the ARB and which things are new. So I understand the board form concrete has been proposed as simulated board form concrete. That's new. Are there any other changes between the project we already recommended approval on the finishes?
I believe one of the other notes
Color?
on the materials was about the LRV value of the white paint on the siding. And we did bring a sample of that. We've selected a paint chip that complies with that requirement. And I believe the other material question was about the transition of the siding, which we've addressed with this added detail.
So did our ad hoc committee ever?
No.
So to provide some clarification, the applicant had responded to some of the comments and staff had reviewed those, but they had not gone to an ad hoc meeting. So I, as in preparation for the Planning and Transportation Commission meeting, had outlined how some of those ad hoc items had been responded to, but I do not believe that we had the ad hoc
So
meeting.
would you mind refreshing my memory? What were the ad hoc committee assignments? What were things they were supposed to look at from our previous approval?
Yes, it looked like the applicant had the list pulled up a minute ago.
I just think it's important that we try to focus on changes rather than reviewing the whole thing over again.
I'm not sure if you guys can read that or if you'd like me to read these out.
I think it's to the chair, that question.
I think everyone can read their screens. We'll do a little
Okay.
speed reading here.
Great.
I see. Okay, so. And then I'm gathered this is in your report. I just want to understand it. So the horizontal siding material on the building is something that was previously proposed and approved.
Does anybody remember anything about an approval on this project?
We recommended approval. The ARB did. I think you voted against it. but
Yeah, it looks like it
3 of us-
says Hirsch and Chen dissented, but 3 of us voted to move it forward.
I remember board member Chen was concerned about the setback and you were concerned about
I'm
the overall.
concerned
design,
that
if I
we
remember.
never had a really, really careful look at the face of the building.
Okay, thank you for that. If I could ask another question of the landscape architect, please. On sheet, I think it's the first landscape site plan. Yes, this one is good too. I notice you're proposing a strawberry tree and a cherry tree under the canopy of the large oak tree next to the decks there. I also heard you say you're planning to keep the asphalt paving under the tree canopy.
Not where those circles are that have just been drawn. The asphalt is kept. One of the other drawings has a red box around the area where the asphalt is being kept. If you zoom in, you might be able to see it. It basically tracks the deck shape.
I see. So under the deck, you're retaining the asphalt parking.
Right. Yeah, approximately the way that's drawn is.
And I'm sure this is a question for the arborist, not you, but you're standing there. That's the intent of that is to protect the tree, to help it increase its chances of survival by keeping the asphalt.
Minimize construction activity, sort of leave it the way it is now. The tree has done well as is. We looked, there was one opportunity where they looked at, you could remove the asphalt, leave the base rock. I just don't trust the idea of messing with it at all. So we kind of thought leaving it alone was the better alternative. It provides actually quite a good base to put pedestals on and just doesn't disturb anything. If a vehicle drove over it during construction, it's pretty much the same as what's happening now. There's cars drive on it now.
So my question more, excuse me, is to do with the two trees you are proposing. Have you planted and successfully strawberry trees and cherry trees under the canopy of live oaks previously?
Cherries have worked, actually. The arbutus will grow in the shade. So, we don't normally get a lot of trees planted under these canopies. Part of the rationale for the additional trees is there's tree planting requirements for replacement trees. So we're open to changing those species. That's not a problem.
Okay, just I flagged it on my notes that it was
I thought
questionable, but
I think that's a good catch.
Okay, well, you answered that question. Thank you. My last question is to staff. Why are we recommending to continue this project?
The main reasons for staff asking for a continuation is to allow the ARB an opportunity to provide comments and see those comments get responded to. If a recommendation is made for approval, the next step would be going to the Planning Commission. The second reason is that the proposed changes have not finished being reviewed under CEQA. And so, although we do not necessarily anticipate any significant new changes as a result of adding the 2 stories, we just want that review to be complete.
Are we unable to move forward without that CEQA review? Everyone's looking at the lawyer now.
The draft CEQA was circulated, and so the identified impacts have been publicly noticed.
Sorry, I couldn't get the button to work.
Not a problem.
You could move forward without having, without having the final, what do you call it, the final draft of the updated CEQA document before you, because the decision on whether to accept that analysis rests with the Planning Commission and the Council. But as Emily noted, if there are concerns related to the changes to the project that the ARB did want to wait and see how the CEQA analysis looked at those concerns, that consideration would cut in favor of continuing this to another ARB hearing.
So to just put a fine point on it, if the ARB wishes to make a recommendation to move this forward today, that is something that you could do if you chose.
Got it. Okay. All right. At this time, I think we're going to close all questions. So the public portion of the meeting is ceased. And now I'd like to get my fellow board members to each speak a few comments to their thoughts on the project. I will ask that we be reasonably efficient with our time here, again, noting that we are over on our timing. So if you could try and keep it 2 to 3 minutes, and let's hear what everyone has to say. And if someone has said something that you agree with or disagree with, if you agree with, feel free to just note, I agree with that comment, and move on to something that hasn't been discussed yet. So who'd like to start us off? All right, David, please go ahead.
I have a relatively long list, so I'll try to keep it brief. But there's a major item that we discussed last meeting and wasn't kind of resolved, which is the bike room in the basement. And, of all of the items on the list, this is one that kind of sticks in my mind that we have to come up with a better solution. I asked a question before about the ramp slope, and it's really quite excessive for taking bicycles out of the basement on the first floor. Nobody can ride that steep a ramp. I think 6 degrees is a more reasonable ramp elevation change for bicycles. So all of the bikes will be coming through the elevator. And that's really going to, I think, personally, that it's going to cause a conflict with movement within the building and access to the front door, et cetera. And I think it would be dramatically more important to have a bike room on the first floor, where not only will the tenants have daily use of it, but the office space could share in that, so that a piece of the office has an exit to their door for the bicycles that they come to the business with. That's probably a good idea for, you know, future tenants to know that that's a possibility as well. It seems to me that you have two lounge areas on the first floor, and as well as the workplace and mail, et cetera, mail delivery. And I don't know why it is necessary, therefore, to have two lounges in particular. Instead, you could have one lounge and the workspace and access to the deck and mail room and a bike room on the first floor. I encourage you to look into that, you know. You know, I want to sort of preface this whole discussion, if we're having comments, that it's appreciated, extremely well appreciated, that you're choosing to work with a city and not to use the state-given right to just do what you would like to do. And but this is one area which was mentioned by Mr. Volte in the previous meeting and wasn't ever addressed, the bike ramp. Another one that has bothered me, and I don't think my fellow board members have looked at it very carefully, is the way in which the panels extend out beyond the vertical elements and extend the back and forth of all of the elements. It seems to me that it's very important that you create a distinct relationship, which I think the patterning does very well on the surface of the building, but that there is a back and forth play there. And in our objective standards, we think that the dimensional difference of the front and back paneling is 2 feet, I believe it's within the objective standards. And it would be much better if you had a distinct and deeper relationship between the light panel and the dark panel. Seems obvious almost in the elevation that you can achieve that. So that, for example, where you have your vertical walls, the brown panel could pull back of it, you know, and the vertical walls extend out. It's a detail that, you know, you've done a pretty good job of putting most of this together, but that's a detail that I think I personally feel strongly about, that there should be a better relationship between the forward and the back elements of the facade of the building. Quickly to try to, and I'm looking at the decks extending out, I'm wondering how you intend to, and I'm not asking this as a question, how you intend to take care of the water on the decks that are that close to the street edge. And obviously it's not going to be drip treatment. You're going to try to bring it back within the building. So it hasn't been shown yet in detail. So it would be something that ad hoc could look at. But the vertical forms, you know, if you look at your elevation, if we turn to the elevation, so it would seem to me that the brown could be the more receding face and the lighter pieces extending out along each of the facades. It really would be much more powerful. And if that dimension were 2 feet, and then when you turn the corner and you have your vertical stair enclosure, if the brown is, which it happens at each corner, could turn back and the stair enclosure push out. I'd like you to really study that a bit more for the ad hoc.
David, I am going to ask that you
I'm moving on as fast
finalize
as I
your
can.
thoughts. I appreciate it.
I just want to comment that in previous reviews of buildings, office floors, we have often stated that Palo Alto has great air. Could you deal with operable windows on the office floor? They may be not in each of the verticals, but there would be some form of operable window so that you could have a, we've mentioned that in many previous meetings. Okay, back. Balcony railings issues, there is a concern about that, but what I haven't seen any details of are the privacy panels between the railings. If they are part of this, I haven't noticed it. The actual daylight plane that you're showing on sorry about that. 3B, it's taken through the open deck area because it's adjacent to that building. But in reality, it also cuts through 2 floors where the building is out to the perimeter on the east side, south side. So just for clarity within the drawings, I think you should show that. I don't know how that's been, part of the discussion with Emily. And maybe this would be the last one then, is the vertical wall. Again, in looking at the elevation, it seems there's one vertical wall, which is this concrete material. Is that correct? Then just a nod. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an anomaly here on the face of this building. Why all of a sudden a wall that is of a material like that? I simply don't understand it. In some way, the elevator area and and that should be incorporated. Maybe you could change the art deal on that particular wall. My feeling is that it's detrimental. And also, it's very strong, this idea of glass top to this building now and a big overhanging cornice line. I think you could even emphasize that more and it'd make a better building. Maybe it could even come in front of the vertical walls and they would penetrate through it. Just a thought here, just to strengthen the top of the building, especially the cornice line, instead of having it divided, it's some one piece of complete surround for the building at the top, like the rim of a hat. I don't, you don't, when you look at an elevation, by the way, you really don't see from almost every viewpoint of the street, you don't see the mechanical enclosure. An elevation shows it, but it, so again, the objective standards, which we're not using, as Emily described, ask for a recess at some point in the perimeter of a building, a courtyard entry sort of situation. And you're using it with your smaller entryways here on the ground floor, which I think is going to change our standards, that it's a reasonable idea. And a final comment is that I think this is a successful building. I think the tree issue is a serious issue, and I hope the arborist watches it carefully. Even if you put up a good amount of money for the possibility of disaster for the tree, I don't know how that will make a difference with the future, but we'll all hope that they can do the arborist will be appropriate for this. Basically, that's it. I think that you have warmer materials as was also requested here. And as a drawing to the state of where this building is, I can support it.
Thank you, David. Peter, would you like to go next?
Sure, at your request. We have an awful lot of notes here, Kendra, but I'll try hard to parse it out. I would like to see,
Appreciate that.
I would like to see us focus on the changes and stuff. So taking a look at the high level, I'm perfectly fine with the extra height of the building. I want to see this many units. The density is great. I don't have a problem with the daylight playing against a residential office, which is what that really is. I'm also perfectly fine with the middle field setback that was previously approved. In fact, I think it's kind of silly that we're getting a 24-foot setback, but not below the ground, which would prohibit any future use of Middlefield Avenue as a transportation corridor, which is the purpose of the setback. So I don't quite understand why we or somebody or the planning commission has made such a fuss about it. It seems to me the city would have been better off with the previous project. Now here we are with a taller building than many people are comfortable with to preserve a setback that we've not really preserved. So that's just a statement, I guess. I'm fine with it either way. On the building massing and design, I agree with board member Hirsch's comments regarding the interplay of the materials and elements on the facade. However, I think that's what was originally approved, and I'm not sure I want to force the architect to go back through that. I really think the bicycle parking needs to be at grade, at least some portion of it. We had a long discussion twice, if I remember, at previous meetings. So it's something that we'd like to see addressed. We can have you discuss that with us later, but at least one, now two members are saying the same thing. I'm concerned about the balconies near the tree. I get that the tree is going to be impacted. We're trying our best to keep the tree and let the building go forward. With people having balconies right against the branches, Mr. Ream, I think it is correct in that eventually those branches are going to get cut back further so somebody can actually enjoy their balcony, and that's a bigger impact yet on the tree. So I would prefer just to not have balconies where the tree is impacted. That said, I would like to see other apartments all have balconies 100% as required by our code. Right now, I understand there's 6 or so that don't have balconies, and they should. It seems to me that's possible. So unless there's a significant reason, should I be stopping?
I apologize. We're having an interruption for potential an earthquake, 6.7 in Humboldt County. So if we all just sit tight for a few minutes, we'll see if this impacts us or not. But if you'll just give us a few minutes, if you do feel shaking, please duck and cover and make sure you are safe. Humboldt's pretty far away, but usually, that's a big number. 6.7 is pretty big. So
It is.
we'll sit here and chit chat for a few more minutes and nothing yet. I know. The rumbling might take a minute to get to us.
I think I felt something.
Did you just stop it? David's banging on the table over here. All right, apologies for the intrusion. Let's let Peter please continue. And if we do feel shaking, we'll pause again at that time. Thank you.
You'd like me to continue?
Please.
Feel a little bit shaky about this, but okay. My biggest concern with the proposed design is the height of the office space at the top, and then the proposal to have it be all glass on the facade. I think it looks too tall. It should be cut down a couple of feet. I think the roof cornice line needs to be emphasized a little bit stronger, as Board Member Hirsch said. I'm concerned about the impact on birds with the glass, even with the bird safety glazing. And even with my skepticism that I've expressed previously about it, this is one of those situations where when you have a glazed corner of a building, birds see through the building. And that's what experts have consistently cautioned us is the worst situation. The birds see through the glass to the other side of the building and fly into it. And it seems to me that's a design choice you made also just to glaze the whole top of the building. And I just don't think that's a good choice for this design. So I'd like to see the glass vertically reduced and possibly not consistently along the whole facade of the building. And then the roof eave, I think, just needs to be larger to really cap the building, especially when it's this tall. Materials.
Just asking, did anyone else just feel that? I noticed the lights are swinging. Okay, moving on.
So I strongly support keeping the tree protection in place that we have previously approved and not lessening that requirement, but I don't want to revisit that issue either. We dealt with all of that as we went through it. I'm concerned about the proposed trees under the oak tree. I think adding any new trees like that are going to further reduce chances of success of that tree. I'd like to see the landscape architect consult with the city arborist to come up with a planting plan that mitigates impact to the tree. You might have to find a different place to put replacement trees, but that's not an appropriate place for it. And then I would be in favor of finding a way to recommend approval of this with a return to an ad hoc committee. I think it's ridiculous it's taken so long to get this project approved. We need to move this along, in my opinion. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and I appreciate your patience with the intrusion and that potential earthquake there. I'd like to go next, if that's all right. We'll just go down the line today. I admit that when I first saw this proposal, I was a bit dismayed by the height. It is a pretty notable height increase, and it will dramatically impact the neighbors around it. That being said, and again, to Peter's point, we did ask for this 24-foot setback along Middlefield, and trade-offs do need to be made. I also was a little initially dismayed at the concept that there was only a 3 increase in units. However, noting how many increased from being studios to single bedrooms, I'm much more in favor of this project. I think that studio apartments, and actually it's been shown that studio apartments are typically more transient residential units. People move in, they move out as soon as their situation changes. Those are typically, single people. As soon as they get into a relationship that's any sort of long-term commitment, they need more space. So I think by encouraging single bedroom and 2-bedroom units and having quite a few more of those, you're actually going to increase the stability of the people living in that unit, in this building, and that will be a benefit to the neighborhood as a whole. In regards to the tree, I think that this tree is going to be impacted one way or the other. I think that to the applicant's point, we have a city arborist who everything is being done to their compliance, and we're going to defer to the experts on that one. Again, sort of the elephant in the room here is that there's the potential for a builder's remedy on this site. Right? We don't really need to talk about it in too much detail, but with the builder's remedy, there's no guarantee that tree will ever exist in 5 years from now. So I'm of the opinion that I think that the applicant is being thoughtful and considerate with their design choices. I would hopefully encourage them to be thoughtful with their means and methods as well, especially when we're talking about shoring items like that. And just keeping an eye on that tree, I think, is the best thing we can do, is try our best to preserve it. I actually would not be opposed to removing the balconies from those 2 units to make way for that tree to have a little bit more breathing room. I know we do like the outdoor spaces for each and every unit, but this is sort of a unique situation. So if those balconies need to be removed, I would not be opposed to that personally. I think, again, also traffic, parking, these are common complaints when we get buildings like this. And unfortunately, there's really not too much we can do. With this building, I think I'm pleasantly surprised by how much parking there is. Many of these units, as was stated, if this building was 1 block closer to Caltrain, there would be no parking requirement, period. So the fact that there's 2 levels of parking here is very encouraging to me, and it is in a very walkable area. I used to live downtown myself. We walked everywhere, and we were even farther away from the Caltrain station. So I am hopeful that this will be a walkable unit. I think that the smaller footprint overall does improve the site and the landscaping. I think that it makes that corner at Middlefield and University much more inviting visually. We're getting a second notification for an earthquake. So again, this time. Oh no, we're getting a tsunami warning now, excuse me. Okay. Earthquake seems to have triggered a tsunami. So we are luckily not too close to the coast. I think we'll be fine. So we'll continue our meeting. All right. So again, I'm a little disheartened by the height increase. I think it's a little bit overscale for the neighborhood. And I understand the neighbors' concerns very acutely. It's a pretty notable building. I did have a preference for the smaller building. That being said, I appreciate the increased units, and I do appreciate the setback from Middlefield. I think it's going to be more of a gateway building to downtown the way that it's designed now. In appreciation of the neighbors as well, I think that this top floor of office space has benefits and drawbacks. Benefit being that it will hopefully be not inhabited at nighttime. So these neighbors will be less impacted by the tallest members of this building. However, with floor to ceiling glazing, if there is somebody working at 10 p.m. at night, I'd be very dismayed if all of those floor lights were on. So I think there should be some consideration for timing of the overall large lighting on that top floor. And that if there is someone working late into the night, that there's a way for them to have a small light system on or off. I'd really be opposed to this being a full floodlights on at 10 p.m. at night. That's going to absolutely bother the neighbors. So that really does need to be taken into consideration. Again, I'm going over myself, but I will try and wrap this up. Very small comments. H plan needs some work. That it's the one where the elevator for the office building goes through the unit plan. So I would just say, please take a secondary look at that H unit plan. Maybe there's something that could be done with the B3 next to it, more of a Tetris shape, something like that. But that elevator going through really makes that H plan a little bit uncomfortable is the word I'm going to use. The large area at the elevators and the entrance, I'm wondering if there's a way that that could be utilized better. Maybe the electrical room gets shifted around and you can again increase, or you could increase one of those units out into that space next to the residential elevators a little more. Again, just food for thought, nothing major. And with that, I will wrap up my comments. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you to the public speakers. We do appreciate your input, and leave this over to Board Member Chen.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I think we all agree that the tree is important to this project and should be protected. And I think we should just trust the arborist professional opinion and trust the city that the tree will be safe. And as far as the office, although it is not common to have an office above the residential units, I think it works well in this case. Although I know you start from the flood zone requirement, but I think it also solves some other problems, like it will eliminate the possibility to have the party on the roof deck as previously proposed. And also the all glazing scheme will make the building lighter. As far as the building height, I'm okay with it because if you look at the Graduate Hotel that is 2 blocks away, it is also a 6-story building, which is about a similar scale of this building. So I'm fine with it because it's happening in this area. And I do appreciate the effort you made to make sure the special setback meet. I think the openness of this intersection, it makes this the downtown entrance to be more welcoming. However, I would suggest the staff to give clear direction on whether the applicant should take additional consideration on the structure support if there is any future transportation improvements happen in the future, or as the other board member mentioned, it is kind of meaningless for the 24 setback. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you applicants for the presentation and all the public speakers as well, both in support and opposition of this project. All your voices have been heard. The couple of things I just want to point out is, as Board Member Chen mentioned as well, the structure of that first floor on the parking lot, the 24-foot setback really needs to be designed for future sidewalk, bike lane, parking, however, potential uses. I know it's not in the short-term planning, but it's absolutely meaningless to have the 24-foot setback if the roof cannot support a future vehicular traffic. On the balcony, I just want to mention that, as we said previously, the 9 balconies that are facing the tree, it should not be there because of for the protection of the trees, as others have already mentioned. My biggest issue is with the daylight plane, actually, for that single-family residence, which I know is currently not being used as an office. But it seems like I've been kind of doing the math on the square footages, and it seems like you have so much lounge and kind of amenity spaces on the first floor, that a reduction of 1,000 square feet of office on the fourth floor, or sorry, sixth floor, would give you back majority of that daylight plane for that space. It's the notch from the stair on the middle field side, up to about where your balcony is on the sixth floor. That's about 1,000 square feet, which if you add that square footage to the first floor lobby, I know in terms of tenant, it would be two separate tenants instead of one tenant, but it seems like it's setting a bad precedent for not holding to the daylight plane requirements of the city for the density and for that 25% FEMA requirement, which is not impossible to do on the first floor. That 1,000 square feet that's impacting the neighbor can be accommodated on the first floor, whether it's reduction of lounges, reduction of fitness space, any one of the blue can spill anywhere next to it in order to meet that requirement. So that's my biggest issue with the plans as proposed. As far as materials, this, much as I'm usually not a fan of fake materials, this fake board form material is not bad. But looking at the elevations, it seems like, you know, as a design logic, you've got that board formed looking material going to that eave line of the sixth floor. And on the north elevation, on the south, or I forget which way is north south, but Middlefield versus Byron. But when it's facing University, you've got the public art, the walls that also go to the same eave line, and it's not the same material. So it seems like as a design logic, it should go on that, the space surrounding the public art as well. I think that's my comments. Oh, one last thing about the trash room and deliveries. I know you need to kind of make multiple use of that trash room, and it seems like just a minor swap on the upper levels of where the chutes are versus where the door into the trash room is. You can get a little bit more depth into that first floor trash room. If the chutes are towards the right in plan, the door goes to the left in plan, and therefore you have a little bit more room at the towards the roll down doors in the entrance, which you would use as potential deliveries other than for trash. And that's all. Thank you so much for everybody's time. I know it's been a long one.
Board Member Adcock, if I could, on the daylight plane question, I have an idea for us here. We have coming up another project where one of the things we're asked to look at is daylight plane impacts along El Camino. And I've long started to think that a 16-foot starting point for a daylight plane when you're doing a commercial or a larger development next to R1 residential is more appropriate. Sort of bridges the gap.
Right.
The 10-foot starting point is so restrictive.
It is.
If we were to say on this case that an imaginary daylight plane that was starting at 16 feet going up, would that sort of meet your concerns a little bit and still work? I don't think we can set a code on it, but that would just be our recommendation on how far to cut it back.
I think so, because basically where the dotted line is shown, it's pretty much right up to the stair. And, you know, the 16-foot, like the little cutoffs right on the roof line of the sixth floor, for instance, I'm willing to let go on that. But like the big chunk of the sixth floor cutting off, like if you draw that dotted line across, it goes halfway into that house. Right. So if like you're suggesting, if we start at 16 feet, the clipping of that corner of the sixth floor goes away, and some of that sixth floor glass box can also remain and still clear the daylight plane.
Okay, well, I can support that sort of restriction if we're all on the same page on that. It's a compromise.
And the question would be, would that negatively impact their potential for the office space? Because if we do pull that back, then they can't meet their 25% office space, and then they lose their parking.
I heard
So it's
Board
all
Member
connected.
Adcock say she did this to back of the seat envelope calculation. That seems to work regardless.
Like if
Obviously,
the
we want to
first
make sure
floor,
they can do
whether
that.
it's the office lobby or a separate small tenants, because the office lobby is quite large. If you have even a small separate tenant space within the pink and the yellow on the first floor, that would be the trade-off for the, whether it's 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet, that would get clipped by reducing that, in response to the daylight plane issue.
And so that would basically be reducing the size of the fitness center and converting some of that to office lobby space.
Correct.
Okay. And there's no restriction on that. There's no like minimum requirement for this fitness space. It's sort of a bonus at this point.
Right, everything on the first floor is amenities, if I understand correctly, for the residents, other than the office lobby and the 25% FEMA office square footage requirement is partly that 800 something square foot lobby on the first floor and 8,000 square foot commercial space on the sixth floor. So that's the net total that they're trying to meet. But the more of it they can shift to the first floor, the less the smaller the sixth floor needs to be.
I mean, I would take this to a vote here because I honestly think that some forms of encroachment as you're discussing here and trying to adhere to zoning, which really doesn't apply as much or ought not, in my opinion, apply to a building like this that is more like a downtown building than it is a residential building. And you're talking about impacting a one-story building next door. Is it really worth changing the profile of this building this way? I don't think so. And does it change the use of this office space as well? Because you're losing a whole strip of this office space all the way along. In fact, what doesn't show is 2 floors below where there's also an encroachment into the daylight plane. Peter's comment is that either you raise the beginning of the daylight plane in buildings like this, or you perhaps allow an encroachment, which is something I think planning should think about, and we are going to maybe talk about it even later today. I really don't think that we should fuss around with this kind of change in the planning here. It's a more major issue.
I admit that I'm with David on this one. I think that this is a bit of an extreme request and a pretty big modification to this upper level.
I just want to add one thing to this.
It's about precedent setting, like, because I'm trying to look up what the zoning is of the next door.
RM20.
RM20, and therefore, hence the daylight plane requirement comes into play, right? If we're saying in this particular development that's not required, doesn't that apply to the future development as well? Is that a precedent we're wanting to set?
Because this is a PC project, it's a special project. It's on a very important street entry into the downtown. The densities begin to change right here, or they can change right here. And we've been talking all along about it being part of downtown. I think it's the transition that we have to make basically to allow for denser buildings on sites like this. And I think we're going to face it again and again with the state requirements. And so I'm in favor of keeping the rear daylight plane exactly with the exceptions that are being allowed here. And there are lots of other exceptions that you certainly noted all the exceptions. We have to face up to those exceptions to get buildings like this built. I don't want to steal from the commercial possibility of that top floor. Have to talk in the way of a developer, but I'm concerned that this project has to pencil out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 8,000 and change square foot commercial space. It'll be 7,500 square foot or 7,000 square foot commercial space.
Are you looking into the fact that the daylight plane actually cuts into the residential space as well?
No, because that's where like the 16-foot makes that go away.
If you take an imaginary plane that's starting at 16 feet, it will only affect the commercial space. And I believe it's a strip approximately 80 feet long by 6 or 8 feet deep.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
I don't think that's actually accurate. I think that it may also impact the J units and the G unit and the D unit on that 5th floor, right? Because
Well,
if
if
you're
you-
running that all the way across,
Well, no, this is only where it's adjacent. to the
only
signal.
adjacent to that. So you're saying only on that right-hand side of this plan set. So only at the F1, F2.
So why
That's where-
only there?
Where they are
Okay, so you're
showing
not
it in
going,
that section.
so the recommendation is not to go, do you mind pulling up that office floor plan, please, on A 2.3C?
Well, I think board members' argument that this is setting a precedent is what's compelling. I don't think we're actually protecting somebody's residence
No.
with this daylight plan. It's just not the case.
Right.
And board member Hirsch is correct. In the long run, this is all going to be tall buildings at this entrance to town.
Right.
But what precedent are we willing to set? How do we want to get this process going
Precedents
forward?
are changing.
Hold for a second.
So that's sort of my take, board member Adcock, is I'm willing to support you on this for that reason. Not strongly though, so you better make the case.
Agreed. I don't know what the office is next door, and will that forever remain an office or go back to being residential? It is RM20 zoned. It is about it's not just about this project, what precedent are we setting?
I want to say one other thing about making this kind of change, because you're saying, well, you can make up for it on the 1st floor. I feel much more strongly about having a bike room on the 1st floor than I do about having additional commercial space on the ground floor.
Yeah,
and
I would
another
agree with
usage.
that.
Much more. It's very much more important to this building to be workable, and with the bicycles in the basement, they will complicate the issue on the residential side significantly unless they're provided for on this 1st floor. And it's a direct relationship to what you're asking for.
That's absolutely true. However, the 1st floor has a lot of amenity spaces, the fitness room, all of the lounges. If the applicant wanted to trade off some of the bike room for one-to-one of amenities, bike room is an amenity for the residents and some for the office, obviously.
It's a
And so
requirement,
are all
not
of
an
the lobbies.
amenity.
I'm sorry?
It's not an amenity, it's a requirement.
A required amenity for the building, and therefore is a lounge more important than, or 2 lounges, more important on the 1st floor, the co-working space. There are a variety of spaces on the 1st floor that are for the residents if you were to push for the bike room. I don't think what I'm getting at is, it's not a trade-off. Do we impact the daylight plane or do we impact the bike room? Those are not one-to-one trade. There are a variety of other spaces on the 1st floor that can be traded for bike room.
I mean, I will agree, there's a lot of co-working space there. And how likely is that to all actually be utilized? It's pretty logical situation where this bike is sort of in the middle, and then it's the residences can use it and the office people can use it, right? So it's sort of in between. Initially, I was thinking over here in that pink area, but that actually makes it very difficult for the residences to use. So maybe something really more towards that center area would be better. That being said, I'm a big advocate for not designing a building based on what may come in the future. So I really believe that you design for what's here. That being said, this is a tricky one because I would put money that residential will not be residential for much longer, and that will be taken over by a larger building as well. Also impacting the Hamilton a little bit more down the road, and also impacting that tree more down the road. At the end of the day, we are being presented with this project as it is. I think that asking for a change of that nature is a pretty big ask at this stage, and also knowing that there are potential other outcomes to this project. I don't think that daylight plane and that reduction in office space will make or break this project in a profound way. I don't necessarily think it's setting a negative precedent. So while I understand the argument, on this particular project, I can't support that. I think that we leave it as designed, and we either decide to accept this design or we don't.
Board member Chen. You're in the middle on this one.
Yeah, I agree with what Chair just mentioned, and also especially when we're looking on the sites on either Middlefield or Byron Street, if you see, no, actually on Middlefield, if you cut off the office there, the building itself, the massing, it seems like it's unbalanced. It just stepped back. So I think the office there is it kind of like balanced on each side of the staircase. So I would support to keep it as is.
Board Member Eckhart, we tried. We're all asking for bicycle parking at the ground level. Is that a consistent requirement from everybody here?
Yes.
If you turn in your mic, Peter, when you speak.
We're all stating we want to see parking at the ground level for bicycles. So that's just an absolute, that could return to a subcommittee to show that. Do we need to say how much parking?
Yeah. We
Well,
should say how much.
I
for
think that,
sure.
there are 2 rooms in the first basement for parking. And I pointed out that you're never going to take it up the ramp. It's not going to work. Nobody can, it's
And
just,
that's not their intent based on the diagram.
So to staff, didn't we have, you just showed earlier the requirements, the conditions of approval we recommended. I thought there was a statement about bicycle parking for 50% of the required amount. Why not just stick to the same thing?
Yes, I can get that number. I just need a minute.
Peter, that was your recommendation last time. I took it over.
I didn't hear anybody talk about the tree under the oak tree. Is that obvious to all of us?
Yeah, I think that that's just not going to thrive there. Needs to come up with a different location for those 2 trees under that oak.
Between that and digging into the root zone to plant the tree in the first place.
Right.
So that's
Agreed.
something that they can work that out, but
Yeah.
The prior motion included moving 25% of the long-term bike parking to the ground floor.
look,
Long-term.
Long-term is in the sub-basement or the first basement?
It would move some amount of the below grade bike enclosure spaces to the ground floor was your previous motion.
I would also argue that what you want at ground level is the daily commuters, right? And long-term bicycle parking wouldn't need to be at ground level, but I think that daily commuting absolutely needs to be at ground level.
So our code, the daily commuters can be included in long-term bike parking. Short-term is typically just bike racks in front of the building. And so the long-term is any type of formal, yeah. So even the 8-hour workday would be long-term.
Okay. So short-term, long-term parking is what we're looking for.
Okay.
shall I try to craft a motion for this? Are we moving along those lines? And do we have general consensus that this can get a recommendation for approval to a subcommittee?
Subcommittee. yes.
To an ad hoc committee? Yeah, okay. So could you leave that up, Emily, please? I'd like to start with that. So I'd like to move that we recommend approval of this project with the following items returning to a subcommittee, to an ad hoc committee for review. So if we could start with the list of 6 items previously, I'd like to see which ones of those are.
Yep, I just needed to move it from my April notes to my today notes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily, for preserving this list for us. It's extremely helpful. So the tree protection zone, have we changed from this? 33 feet below ground, they said, I heard them say they went farther away. So can we just leave this standard, and is this reasonable for the applicant?
To provide some clarification, it was increased where possible. However, there were certain locations, particularly at the parking ramp, where that was not possible. To Board Member Hirsch's comments about, potentially like the steepness of that ramp is to get it as far away from the tree as possible. So staff does not believe that it could be engineered differently adjacent to the parking ramp, but the foundation was moved back after the ramp concludes
I'd
where
like, I'd
possible.
like to change this to say 30-foot tree protection zone, regardless of whether it's below or above grade. So that's my motion, please.
But does that include shoring or not shoring?
Well, I'm going to leave it to the city arborist to decide whether, what impact they have within the tree protection zone. Generally, that's something that they work through in the permitting process of how do they mitigate those impacts in a tree protection zone. My understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, but that the city stipulates a tree protection zone, and then some work within that is allowed over construction, but under significant restrictions.
So that's correct. And as had been commented earlier, the tree protection zone as defined by the city is 41 feet. There is already protrusions into that. The intent of the ARB motion last time was, I believe, more in reference to the building itself and or the shoring. And the way this is phrased could definitely be changed to better reflect your intent, since the definition of the tree protection zone would not be changing. And as you noted, certain activities are allowed in the tree protection zone, which is already accounted for in the design.
Is there a way we can phrase this to say that it is no more invasive to the tree than is currently shown on the plan set?
Well, I think the building is just beyond 30 feet from the edge of the trunk. That's where this 30-foot number is coming from. So
I guess the question is, are we comfortable with what's shown in the plan set?
yeah.
Then we should just phrase it that way. That if they follow the plan set or adjust it so that it's farther away from the tree, that's fine.
What
They cannot
as
get, they
shown
cannot get
is
more, yeah. as
okay, but
shown.
it's, they need to work with the arborist to make sure the
Of course.
construction activity, including shoring, which may potentially be left in place, be accounted for within that
Yeah.
protection zone.
Second, show that approved plans do not further. Okay, fine. The two other conditions in that I want to keep, the 200% bond on the tree and no balconies into the tree branches. We want to keep the two other conditions in just part one, that we have a 200% bond on the tree and that we do not want balconies projecting into those branches, into that zone. That's the same as before. You could keep the same phrasing. I think number 2 has gone away because they've moved that window. And I think number 3 is taken care of. And
gone away because we have it could be applied instead to Middlefield, where there is transparency, additional transparency at the corner.
yes, so items 2 should be removed from this list. Item 3, the roof deck screening, I think they've proposed something in the plan set. I was okay with that.
Well,
So-
there is no roof deck anymore. It's really that there's a balcony at the office level.
Well, the same effect, and I think the screening they provided is fine. So I think you can just strike that from the ad hoc committee, though. That's already done. Item 4, I think, should remain as we phrased it. And we'll just ad hoc committee review that. Item 5 is moved.
Sorry, jumping in here, just noting that the white paint that they provided was in compliance with the LRV that is requested.
It is. I'm more comfortable letting the ad hoc committee have purview of all these materials as a whole. We went through quite a discussion over what that LRV should be, if I recall. It's way too bright for my taste, but.
I think I was driving that conversation.
You get your 83R LRV. Okay. The foundation, number 5 is not there because okay, number 6, long-term parking, we like that. Then that becomes number 3. So then there was talk about requiring the parking structure under the easement on Middlefield Road to have some additional engineering. And I don't know how we could require that or send that to an ad hoc committee, frankly.
As Board Member Adcock mentioned, it to be structured so that future changes can be accommodated in the street and or bikeways et cetera.
I think that's just totally unrealistic, gang, to let the city expect they're going to put a public street on top of a private garage. That's never done.
But we have driveways on top of garages all the time. It's not impossible to design to.
Oh, it's possible to design it, but I can't imagine the city actually doing.
Yeah, in what circumstance would the city actually take over the entire stretch of Middlefield and say this property that is your property is now for us to use?
But you can
Right.
continue to use it underneath.
Right. There's the setback is there for visual effects and utilities and items like that. I don't think that there's any intention that the city would come in and say, eminent domain, we're taking over this part of your actual property. The whole point is that they are building this garage to the property lines. They're not building beyond.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable putting that in this motion. So let's do that as an unfriendly later if somebody wants to push it.
But then the setback, there's no point to the setback then.
Oh, absolutely there is. It's sort of the visual impact on the area and the fact that every single other street, every other building along Middlefield does respect that 24-foot setback. And should there be like utility need along that road, you could do that. I hear
Not
what you're
with the
saying now
garage.
with the garage underneath. So you're right, subterranean utilities, but would there ever be an impact for cars driving on it? And I think the answer is no. I can't imagine where they would say, okay, we're going to take over this portion of several public properties or several privately owned properties, take that portion that is technically within your property and bring it to the city, and we're going to pave it and make a wider street.
That's the point.
Okay,
of the
let's
setback.
keep
Yeah.
moving on. I don't want to put that in
I
this
don't think
motion.
that is the point of the setback, actually.
Can we
Yeah, I mean, that would be a
Can we
question, but
clarify
it's,
this?
So,
you
Emily,
don't have
could
a
you please
setback
add
for
that
eminent
all
domain.
other residential units need to comply with the private open space requirement of the city?
Yes, I can add that separately, although to the point about the special setback, we can consider that for the 800 San Antonio project, which was also a PHZ with a special setback, of course, being along San Antonio rather than Middlefield. The solution was that we did include a condition of approval to dedicate the portion of the setback as an easement rather than merely a special setback. And so that easement could provide the city more of a legal basis to utilize that space in the future. But again, this would only apply to the 100-foot frontage of Middlefield that is on this property and would not affect other adjacent properties.
Right, it would just be this one unique condition placed on this property alone,
But
which
this is
feels
the-
dramatically unfair.
But this is the unique property, putting 2 levels of garage below the setback.
But this
So
never-
I think what we did in the San Antonio one was ask for a 3-foot vertical clearance from sidewalk to the top of the roof, something like that, as a potential future easement for utilities otherwise.
Those were 2 separate items, but yes, we ensured a certain amount of soil depth above the parking garage, which we would also have to do here since there are trees proposed to be planted in that area. And then separate from that, to have the special setback as an easement to the city.
I'm making the motion. I don't want to include anything now on that. Item 4 should include, please, that all residential units should comply with the city's private open space requirements, excepting those that project or that are abutting the tree.
Elimination of balconies and tree.
And we have that in here. That's on number 1. The 2 trees, the cherry and strawberry tree, let's see, how do we phrase this?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We'd like the landscape architect to revise the tree planting plan to eliminate planting new trees under the canopy of the oak tree.
Just to clarify, with the intention that those 2 trees be relocated somewhere else on the site, correct?
Well, that's up to them to meet their requirements, but
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I don't know how to phrase that, giving them some latitude to figure out what to do, but we really want to help us staff on this. I want to have the city arborist approve the landscaping plan for whatever's going on under that tree. That's really what it comes down to. If the city arborist is okay with this, I guess we're okay with it. And have put in here, have the city arborist have approval of that specifically. I only heard two of us talk about the massing, the daylight, the glass up on the top floor. I'd like to propose that we put as item number 6, the applicant revise the upper floor to reduce the height and percentage of transparency of the upper glazing, but not leave it prescriptive. In other words, just make reductions. And the ad hoc committee will have to do that. So reduce the height and total transparent area of the glazing is what I wanted to say. Just less glass.
Do we agree as a board on that?
Well, this is how we find out, David. We're making a motion. We'll see if I get a second on it. What am I forgetting that we talked? Oh, yes, of course. Item number 7, that there be a shading plan put in place and a lighting control plan to control the office lighting in the evening. You might want to dig up, we've used something similar in the past, how that's done.
But asking him to do it is good enough at this point.
Well, yeah, staff, again, help us out here. We've had this condition come up on several office buildings where large windows face residences. And we've come up with language to get shading and control of the lights at night.
Yes. Could I also potentially provide a recommendation to have that be included as a condition of approval rather than an ad hoc item?
Yes.
Since, as you noted, we do
Sure.
have other times where we've done that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's great if we don't have to do that. Yeah, so maybe you have to separate out which things go to the ad hoc committee. Is there anything else?
Well, there's, the sort of gray wall that goes all the way to the top. There was some concern from me about the.
Let me see if I can get a second on this. That's my motion. Do I have a seconder?
I will second.
Okay, so now we're open to amendments, friendly or unfriendly to this. So why don't you go ahead, Board David, how would you like to see this changed?
Well, I'd like to eliminate a vertical wall that aesthetic issues, some of the aesthetic issues here, which
So
we don't seem to focus on all
So
that
be
much.
concise. What would you like us to
Yeah.
say is, this will go to the ad hoc committee.
I would like to see the area around the residential entry, which with a green vertical wall, be incorporated in an element that is inclusive of the gray wall to its right.
Okay, that's too vague still. How can we be more precise? I don't understand what you're talking about, to be blunt.
This whole wall here is made of the same material as the base.
So you're talking on the University Avenue elevation, right?
Mhm.
That's sheet A
A
3.2B.
3.2B.
So I see one vertical element of simulated board formed concrete. And you're suggesting that that should be
Incorporated with however the windows work in between. The windows are for the elevator lobby all the way up the building, but it is really one element.
So what you'd like to do is request us to add an additional ad hoc committee recommendation to review or revise the design of the elevation on University Avenue to incorporate windows better with the board formed concrete vertical element.
Well, no, I'd like the board form to be the same as whatever is on the stairwell wall to its left,
I see, so to eliminate the board formed concrete.
Mhm.
Are you sure we want to be that prescriptive, telling the architect what to do?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable being that detail oriented about what materials they're allowed to use where. And in fact, I actually quite like that it's a little bit different than the other one. I think if it was matching, it would be a little less attractive in my mind.
It's coplanar though, and you can see it on the cover rendering where,
Oh, yeah, I see, you're right. That's
yeah,
weird. And like usual, David, you've got your finger on a good point here. How can we phrase it so the architect still has?
Yeah,
latitude to-
let him examine it. It was mentioned,
So
and they took notes.
If we just say revise,
Revise the elevation so that those two are not, are interrelated.
to improve the relationship between the materials on the, let's see, that's the west end of the University Avenue elevation. Can we write it that way, Emily, perhaps?
Above the 650 numbers.
I think it's both panels of public art and that gray wall, like the material to be studied further on those three vertical
Yes.
panels.
Yes, correct. To be studied is good enough at this point.
And
I would like to add to that, as you turn the corner, you get, especially if let's see from the other elevations. You turn the corner, say on elevation A 3.2A, and it, even though there's no balcony at this point, lower point, oh, there is, but why wouldn't that wall be on the corner be on the east side? No, east side, well, south side here. Why wouldn't that corner be brown? And then why wouldn't it turn the corner?
Again, I think we're treading into territory here where I'm getting a little uncomfortable with us telling exactly what needs to happen where. We're not, our job is not to design the building for
Okay,
the
so
architect.
then re-examine the use of two of the materials to see where they're most logical related to each other.
So David, it's number 7 on the screen here. This is your request to make a change. Make sure it says what you wanted to say.
Well, I'm having a hard time. You're good with the words.
And Emily, if you don't mind, I know we're flip-flopping back and forth here. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the graphics of A 3.2B, just so we can all make sure we really understand what we're talking about here, and then we'll flip back to the language that you're trying to type out at the exact same time. Appreciate you juggling this for us.
B. So this material on the right. And as you turn the corner, you see the brown coming through on the strip edge of the building at the top, actually on both ends of the building.
Sorry, is it this little brown edge up there? Is that what we're
No,
discussing?
no. Over on the very right side, when you're looking at the staircase.
Yep, okay.
So at the top, you see the brown beyond.
Yep.
It's contiguous with the lighter tone on the base that is exactly coplanar.
Rendering R3, the back of the package, shows this quite well.
Emily, if you wouldn't mind going to rendering R3, I think that'll help.
Yeah,
us
the
with-
renderings were provided to me in a separate PDF package, so
Oh,
it's
not a
going to take a
problem.
little longer.
Not a problem.
So David, are you requesting to
yes,
revise the
I-
whole corner or just the two pieces on the elevation on University?
See, the university piece that has A31A has lighter color on the right-hand side of the building above the gray base. And then it turns to brown, but it's coplanar with that top piece.
Got it. So we're really looking at the Byron Avenue elevation.
And we're also looking at both elevations, Byron and the middle field. The middle field on the left is the
Oh,
same
let's look at the short
situation.
side. There we go. All right, stay there for a second. I don't see it on this elevation. Can you go to
That's
the,
coplanar, what you just.
so from here to here, but they're two very different materials. Can you jump
Yes.
to the other elevation really quick?
That's it. That's
Oh,
what,
sorry, by other, do you mean University or Middlefield?
Byron, please.
both Byron and University.
Oh, this is Byron. Oh, no, that's University. That's Middlefield. There we go. So the issue is that from this brown to that white and from this white to that concrete, that's all coplanar. And David, you're opposed to that.
I think the brown should be brought down to the base.
So basically just instead of having this bump out, because you can see the depth of the windows, you'd rather that be sort of recessed behind.
No, I think that whatever the elevation is should stay the same, but the materials should also stay the same coming
So
down.
you want the brown to come all the way down.
I think it's better. I'm suggesting that be considered.
I don't feel comfortable, again, forcing our opinion of which material where on the architect in this regard.
Well, then say it in a way that we are concerned with the coplanar materials, that they are, the change in the patterning should be reconsidered or studied.
I think this is an excellent opportunity for you to volunteer for the ad hoc committee to review
I
this.
think I'm on it already.
Well,
All right, you signed yourself up there,
We need to give
David.
the architect clear instruction. What I'm hearing
Exactly.
Board Member Hirsch say is whenever you have coplanar materials, it should be the same material, or else you should have a greater offset.
That's correct.
I think we can give them a leeway of, if materials are coplanar, then the separation between them is defined in some way. But like in the rendering, there's a band, there's a color, like a dark bronze looking band, which I think helps. Almost looks like a fascia or a parapet cap. And I think in that particular.
But there is no
location-
parapet.
No, there's no parapet. There's just a color band that separates the materials. This is a pretty, complex in and out in a variety of ways. And I think we can ask them to study coplanar materials, but I don't want to be prescriptive of what they paint where.
So
I don't want to be absolutely prescriptive or conscriptive, but I do think it's worth them looking at it because they have created a strong formal quality to the rest of the facades, which I'm very happy with, as long as it steps in and out properly. So the similar work around the corner can be kind of less in and out, but more regular.
Emily, maybe let me try to rephrase this if it's okay. David, can I take a stab? So if you just say, review and revise the exterior elevations of the building to eliminate or mitigate coplanar situations with the same building material. Review and revise the street facing the elevations of the building as a whole, just leave it elevations. To eliminate or mitigate coplanar, CO, and it's PLANAR.
Good, Peter.
Coplanar situations with the same building material.
Thank you.
That's basically what you're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And does that give the architect, Kendra, enough latitude?
Yes.
Because we're not eliminating it necessarily, but mitigating it, which would mean by mitigation, it's some sort of trim detail or something like that.
Right, whether it's banding or things like that. Okay, I'm comfortable that we are not overly restricting the architect here, so.
You're comfortable, David? This is,
Yeah.
and it's coplanar, PLANAR.
Are we saying coplanar situations with the same material or different materials?
What coplanar situations with different materials? I'm
Right,
sorry,
not
you're
same
absolutely right. I got this backwards. Coplanar situations with different building materials.
Good catch.
Okay, and so we'll leave that to the ad hoc committee to interpret.
That's good.
Okay, so I accept that friendly amendment. Do you?
Okay, so Peter's
And-
motion still stands, my second still stands.
And another.
We have one more friendly amendment,
Or
okay.
unfriendly amendment to add a second point to the condition of approval instead of the 7 points above. So to work closely with the city staff and make sure, how to word it, the structure requirement.
Structure over the garage at easement.
Microphone.
Sorry, structure over the garage in setbacks something to do with easements.
So you might as well tell us which
Gotta be
Caltrans standard
specific.
they're providing, right? You want them to meet a certain engineering standard. So what is it?
Like what we did in the previous project was something to do with 3 feet of vertical clearance between top of garage.
So I've proposed in the past that we insist on 3 feet of vertical clearance to allow for planting.
Right.
It's nothing to do with easements. That was to provide proper landscaping.
Well,
see
and
it-
potential like utility work on
Or
the street.
utility work, but
Right.
it's nothing to do with structural road design. Those were things to give space for plants and utilities. I heard staff say that on a previous project, we asked for an easement to be dedicated
Mhm.
from the applicant to the city. That's a big step. I
Mhm.
can't support that. Talk about
Same,
precedent.
I can't support that either.
So I can support asking for 3 feet of depth.
Vertical, yeah.
And the engineering de facto has to be strong enough to support that soil and the tree and
Yeah,
stuff.
and it's a building roof structure in concrete, so that's not, it's gonna work out anyway, but I think the vertical easement for future work seems like a pretty minor ask, given that they're building right up to the setback.
I imagine they could physically build that, that'd be
Mhm,
fine,
yeah.
but you're not saying they should dedicate an easement, are you?
No, that they designed the roof of the garage to have 3 feet of vertical clearance from the sidewalk grade
Yes.
for future potential utility work.
Is that what you're driving towards, Board Member Chen? You had something different.
Well,
in mind.
yeah, to accommodate proposed planting and utilities. And I think for special setbacks, it is not only for the utilities, but also for the future transportation improvements, right? So it could be,
But how do you define what that is?
well,
I mean, the building code will specify the tree and the soil and utilities. Those have specified
right, yeah.
weights. But
And there's no eminent plan to either widen the road or add bike lane or anything like that within that.
But they would
25
have to
feet.
figure out what that is in order to design for it. And
Exactly.
that's not fair to them, is it? Well, but you're trying to make this motion, and we want it to be friendly, so tell us how you
Well,
want to do it.
yeah, maybe I need everyone's help because since the proposed design already have the 24 feet setback, so we want to make it it makes sense, right? Or if it is not for the future expansion of the road, then why the 24 feet is
Well,
required?
we had wanted it for the visual impact on the town. We had wanted it to allow landscaping.
Right,
Both of
yeah,
those were
but-
accommodating.
But this intersection is really a busy intersection and it's an entrance to downtown and it's always congested. And so in reality, I think at some point Middlefield need to be widened. And, but
again, that's a
Yeah.
really big forward leap that we have no concrete plans from the city to do that. We've got nothing on the table. It could happen 50 years from now. And so
Right,
to
yeah.
put that on this
So-
applicant seems grossly
So
unfair.
if this happened, then say in 15 or 20 years later, then we don't want this structure here to be failure, right? So we
The
just
city
still-
would absolutely insist on taking all of the land, full depth. They would have to revise the parking structure to come back to the property line or to the easement line. There's no way, there's just no way the city would build a road on top of private property.
Through the chair.
Yes.
It seems the intent here is to protect the city's right to do future roadway improvements. And so making note of that concern from the ARB could be sufficient, since this is just a recommendation that still will need to go to Planning Commission and Council.
Okay. If
You're
if
great,
Board
Jennifer.
Member Chen agrees with that, I think that that's maybe how we can reword this. Do you feel comfortable with that?
Do you want to still leave the thing in about 3 feet of depth in soil? Yes, okay. So that's your friendly amendment, and that's okay by me. I'm friendly.
I'm hesitant but friendly. I'll accept it.
Good work, Kendra. Is there any other amendments to this? I would, through the chair, like to ask the applicant to get their sense on two of these that I don't want to be making things that are just going to keep us arguing. Could I have him come to the podium?
Yes, please, if the applicant wouldn't
Mr.
mind
Smith,
stepping up for a few
Can you
moments.
step up for a second? I just wanted to get your take on, I apologize that it's taken 4 years to do this. We're trying hard to get you through, not conditioned, not continued.
Which I appreciate.
So I'm glad you appreciate it. So we're asking you to do a couple of things in this. And I want to hear from you that you're going to do them, not argue with us more, because we want to approve your project.
Fair
We're
enough.
we're asking you to not have balconies into the tree canopy. We're asking you to have bicycle parking at ground level. Can you do those things?
Can I give you quick feedback on the bicycle parking? Because
Please do.
we did discuss this with our,
I want to have this
Quick,
feedback with you. Yeah.
quick interruption here through the chair. I'm sorry. These questions should be very specific. We're past the discussion point. So
Correct.
if you want to go through each of these items and ask them, is this something that's feasible, to try and get something that's pretty close to a yes, no answer, that's appropriate at this time.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to say that we really need to, this discussion is sort of beyond that. So the question really is, do you feel that you are capable of tackling these items that we've presented to you?
I think so. I would love to discuss them in this new committee that's going to meet
Perfect.
afterwards. There are
Okay.
some nuances I think you might find interesting
Okay.
that we've discovered as we've looked into
Okay,
those
then-
two items.
Then I would say let's defer that to the ad
Whatever you
hoc.
like.
Okay.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, motion stands, second stands, everything's written out. I would like to call for vote.
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'd also like to appoint the ad hoc meeting. Mr. Hirsch, you are definitely on that. And do I have another volunteer? Look at you, Board Member Adcock. Board Member Chen? Okay, we'll put Board Member Chen on that as well. Thank you. All right, thank you very much to the applicant. Thank you to the public speakers. And I'd like to just take a look at staff really quick. I know you are anxious for a break. I have a suggestion and I would like to dive right into that suggestion. As the hearing for next week has been postponed and we are no longer seeing where is it? I can find my notes. We are no longer hearing the 762 San Antonio. We'll be discussing design awards instead. I would ask that agenda item number 3 be postponed till next week, till the next hearing, because it really is a very critical item. It's going to need lengthy discussion, and I don't think it's going to be done justice today.
Thank you. That was going to be staff's recommendation as well. I would like to invite the consultant who's supporting us in this item, and it has joined us via Zoom.
If I could ask that the people leaving the room could kindly exit quietly. We are still continuing our meeting on our end, and if you could kindly keep the noise down as you exit the room, we are still continuing our meeting on our end. Thank you very much. And again, I apologize for postponing the second item. If we did have someone waiting and the consultant who is patiently waiting, I believe, or if there was any public speakers patiently waiting, I do sincerely apologize, but this is something I do not feel can be rushed. So.
Yes, we would like to just quickly check in, invite the consultant who's been supporting staff in this work to confirm their availability to join us at the ARB hearing on the 19th.
Please.
If so, this could be continued to that date. We could also just check in to see if there are any members of the public who were here to comment on it, to invite them to have that opportunity, but preference would be to have that after a staff presentation on the 19th.
That is fair. I do see one public speaker in regards to this. Would you feel comfortable coming back, or would you like to say your piece now since you've been waiting for a very long time? Okay, why don't we invite you up to the podium? I would ask that the ARB members, this is very out of the ordinary here, so we're all going to hear this public comment. It is before the speech. Please take notes when we review in 2 weeks from now. This man may not be able to join us for that, so we will take his notes now. You'll have a full 3 minutes to speak. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Sorry, through the
Yes.
chair, let's do the introduction of what this item is.
Perfect.
Go
Okay.
through that initially, but we can save the staff presentation until the next meeting.
Okay, so this would be agenda item number 3. Again, we're going to do a little off script here. It is a study session to review potential amendments to regulations for the El Camino Real focus area and Title 18 zoning ordinance of the Palo Alto Municipal Code to implement Program 3.4E of the adopted 2023 31 housing element. Again, due to time constraints, we are not going to be having a full public hearing about this now. However, we've had a very, very patient person waiting to publicly speak, so we're going to allow them that time now, so they do not have to come back and wait again. So please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks so much. I didn't think it would take this long, but I was actually here to give you guys a compliment. So take the weight of my waiting along with the compliment to give you guys. So my name is Peter Giovanotto. Last name is a long one. It's Giovanotto. So I just wanted to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to express support for this expanded study area for this section of El Camino as the focus area kind of gets looked at for redevelopment. I think that it has the potential to create a more vibrant urban corridor in that area, which has kind of been tired for a long time, and it meets the evolving needs of the community. I'm a townie. I was born here, left for college, left for grad school, came back immediately after. And so I've grown up with this corridor and know it pretty intimately. And I think that this is just a great step forward from the group to look at this and kind of expand that area. It proactively shapes the future vision for this area, and I think the city is actually creating a pretty meaningful opportunity for thoughtful redevelopment in the area, and also kind of increasing relevant land uses for properties around that corridor. In particular, I'm enthusiastic about the possibility of expanding it to include our family's 2 projects, which are on 3606 and 3781 El Camino. While these projects are currently pursuing a development path through the builder's remedy process, we do share the city's vision for turning this section of Palo Alto into a lively urban corridor, and we're excited to collaborate and align our project proposals with the vision as much as possible. Lastly, I wanted to highlight the importance of creating the right conditions for housing development, not only to ensure that projects are financially viable, which I know is a big thing that can be overlooked sometimes as kind of we dive into the details, but also I do want to encourage everyone to foster kind of a great design and dynamic environment in that area, because there's so much change that's going to happen there. Expanding and refining the focus area to support these goals, it's an admirable step, I think, in the right direction, and I fully support the city's initiative to make this vision into reality. So that was it. Thanks a lot.
Before you sit down, would you mind stating those 2 addresses again, 3606 and?
3606 and 3781 El Camino Real.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate your incredible patience with us today. That was a very long first hearing, so appreciate your time.
It was fun. All right, thanks.
Okay, to the staff, is there a way to make sure that this public speaker was noted in the upcoming reports when we roll over to 2 weeks from now? Whether it's lettered out or something, that we make sure that that comment is actually part of the packet for next time.
We can continue that. The commentary will be part of the meeting minutes, so we can include that as a public comment continued on.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, there was one other public speaker.
Oh, as well.
Yeah, I can be exceptionally brief. Amy Ashton, once again,
Hi, Ms.
Executive
Ashton.
Director, Palo Alto Board. We submitted a letter, and actually maybe this is helpful that you get a little extra time to think about this, because the changes that are being made to the zoning, or they're contemplated being made to the zoning on El Camino, are just, I mean, these are transformative. These are huge changes that could unlock so much potential for redevelopment on El Camino. And we were just so excited. Staff flagged the issues that we were looking at, I mean, perfectly. It's the height transitions that don't work. It's the step back requirements that introduce additional fire rating details and increase waterproofing vulnerabilities. We have all these requirements within our code that are still barriers to redevelopment, barriers to housing. And the more we can be flexible with those, the better off we're going to be, because ultimately, if these housing projects are not financially feasible, they're not going to happen. So please review our letter, and definitely we're just excited that this is being contemplated, because it could be so exciting for our city to see these parcels redeveloped. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your time and comments and efficiency. Appreciate that.
Through the chair.
Please.
So 2 comments.
Yes.
Packet page 12 and 13 include the list of pending projects. So for that first public speaker on this item, their projects are listed in those items for reference. As for the second item,
Perfect. Thank
we
you.
will need a motion to continue this item to a date certain, and that would be the December 19th meeting.
Okay, I move to continue this item, agenda item, to a date certain of December 19th,
Second.
Correct.
seconded by Board Member Chen. Can we get a call for vote?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Great. Final item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for November 7th. Do we have any amendment adjustments? Comments? Okay, I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
And can I get a call for vote, please?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
All right. Do we have any board member questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agendas? So basically, we'll be reviewing the El Camino Real Focus Group next week, along with the ARB Design Awards. 2 weeks, excuse me. Thank you. 2 weeks from now. Anything else? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you guys very much.